Good morning and welcome to the New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Public Housing. At this time, can everyone please silence your cell phones? If you wish to testify today, please come up to the sergeant's desk to fill out a testimony slip. Written testimony can be emailed to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Good morning, everyone. This meeting is coming to order. Good morning and welcome to the hearing of the Committee on Public Housing. I am Council Member Alexa Viles, and I chair the Committee on Public Housing. I'd like to thank you all for attending this oversight hearing to examine NYCHA's winter readiness. This topic is especially important and timely now that we have fully moved into cold weather and with the coldest months of the season yet to come. We are soon, is there anyone online? Oh, okay. It is no secret that NYCHA has struggled to adequately provide heat and hot water to its residents. In fact, it has been such a struggle that heating is one of the reasons a federal monitor was appointed to oversee NYCHA. According to the most recent quarterly report issued by the monitor, NYCHA has seen some improvements since it began implementing its heating action plan. Yet we continue to hear horror stories of tenants suffering because their heat has been out for so long and for stretches of time. For example, Woodside Houses has had persistent heat issues since Hurricane Ida. And overall, last heating season, there was a sharp uptick in outages compared to the previous heating season. There was also an increase in the duration in the time of outages. The monitor's report found that NYCHA failed to fully implement its summer preventative maintenance program in 2021, and that staff in NYCHA's heating department failed to follow the procedures for logging maintenance and inspection work. This likely led to worse heating conditions last summer, and who knows what the impact of this will be this season. Today, I'm interested to learn how prepared NYCHA is for the present heat season. I want to learn in detail what improvements NYCHA has made to its heating management services department operations, how NYCHA is better monitoring the work of employees and contractors, and whether NYCHA has successfully completed its preventative maintenance program this summer, and more. The law requires minimum indoor temperatures during heating season. This is required whether it's a private landlord or NYCHA. All New Yorkers, whether residents of public housing or other housing, have the right to safe and habitable housing, and that includes heat and hot water as required by law. If any other landlord is required to ensure their tenants receive adequate heat, there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't expect the same from NYCHA. And listening to the weather forecasts, we are certainly moving into a very cold winter over the coming week. And we must ensure that residents are safe and secure and that we are ready. I would like to thank my staff, Christina Bottego, Edward Cerna, James Niemeister, along with the Public Housing Committee staff, Audrey Son, Jose Conde, Ricky Chaula, and Connor Mealy, for all the work that they've put into this hearing. Anyone online? And with that, we will turn it over to committee counsel.
I will now administer the oath to the administration. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Thank you. You may begin when ready.
Morning, Chair Vilas, members of the Committee on Public Housing, and other distinguished members of the City Council, NYCHA residents, community advocates, and member of the public. Good morning. I am Keith Grossman, NYCHA's Senior Vice President for Operation Support Services. I am pleased to be joined by Javier Almodovar, Senior Director of Heating Management Services Department, and Brian Honan, Senior Vice President for Intergovernmental Affairs, and other members of the NYCHA's team. We share your belief that NYCHA residents should have adequate and consistent heat in their homes. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss the advances we have made over the past several years to improve the delivery of heat and hot water services to residents. While there is more that must be done, the progress can be summarized this way. Through targeted operational investments and improvements to process and management, we have brought down the number of heating outages by 37% this heating season compared to the same period of time last year. Additionally, we have reduced the time it takes to restore heat outages in that same time period by 13% from 8 hours to 7 hours. Our progress is guided by our Federal Monitor approved action plan, which outlines the procedures and protocols we follow to prevent and respond to outages. The action plan also details how we communicate with residents about outages and repairs, provide warming centers in certain scenarios, and investigate outages that cannot be restored within 12 hours. Along with this master action plan, we created individual heating action plans for every NYCHA development, which outline custom solutions for each development's unique challenges. Our goal is to restore heat within an average of 12 hours overall, within 24 hours of 85% of heating outages, and always within 48 hours. So far this heating season, we have exceeded these targets, resolving all heat outages within 24 hours and within an average of 7 hours. Please note that an outage pertains to a total disruption of service on an entire apartment line, hallway, building, section of a development, or entire development. Outages may be planned for scheduled maintenance or unplanned due to unforeseen emergencies. In the event of a planned outage, NYCHA notifies residents in advance via robocalls and notices posted throughout the development. I would now like to walk you through some of the specific work we have accomplished to better deliver heat services to residents. To prepare for each heating season, our Heating Management Services Department, HMSD, conducts annual preventative maintenance to preserve and restore the reliability of nearly 5,000 pieces of heating equipment. This involves cleaning, lubricating, adjusting, repairing, and replacing worn components, and ensuring that equipment and mechanical areas are in satisfactory operating condition. In preparation for the current heating season, HMSD and our vendors performed annual preventative maintenance and made repairs where applicable to 99.9% of all heating equipment. Additionally, we engaged a vendor to help conduct preventative maintenance on some of the boilers citywide, enabling HMSD staff to focus on repairs to heating distribution system. To clarify, boilers and/or hot water units generate heat or hot water, and the distribution systems such as vacuums, tanks, pumps, and pipes deliver heat to residents' homes. Each year, we develop a list of critical heat and hot water equipment and systems that need replacement or extensive repair. And we procure extra parts so that we are prepared when key items fail. For the past 3 years, we have invested a total of $49 million in operational funding in our heating infrastructure before the heating season has even begun. We maintain a reserve of staged and non-staged mobile boilers that can be activated in the event of a large-scale heating service disruption. There are currently 33 mobile boilers in total, of which 25 are connected to developments and 8 can be deployed where needed. We also increased staffing coverage ahead of the winter heating season by adding evening plumbing teams and electrical teams available to be deployed in response to outages. Additionally, an overnight 12 to 8 a.m. plumbing team is added when temperatures are below 32 degrees. For this heating season, we increased our headcount. We have hired additional field supervisors and are in the process of hiring 70 permanent maintenance workers to support the reorganization of HMSD into a neighborhood-based model. As part of NYCHA's transformation efforts, the heating neighborhood model will reorganize our coverage of developments from the current 13 clusters into 25 neighborhoods. Smaller portfolios will enable each field heating superintendent and administrator to fully understand the needs of each heat and hot water system within their neighborhood. Neighborhoods will be led by a field heating superintendent who will report to the heating neighborhood administrator, or HNA. The HNA will report to one of 3 field operations deputies, and ultimately to the head of HMSD. We will establish a data analytics unit that will use key performance indicators to identify and track areas where we need to improve. A planning and skilled trades unit will address patterns of heat complaints and service disruptions before and during the heating season. HMSD special teams, composed of highly experienced heating staff, will address the more complex issues that arise and perform preventative maintenance and repairs. The chief benefit of this reorganization is that crucial decision-making which occurs during an outage is moved closer to the root of the issue. Additionally, NYCHA's heating staff will gain a deeper understanding of a particular development's needs and challenges. Work orders and resources will be better distributed, and there will be greater collaboration between residents, NYCHA staff, and community organizations. This new staffing model will also align additional managerial employees to the evening heat desk operations, streamlining decision-making for issues that arise after traditional business hours and during weekends and holidays. In sum, the heating neighborhood model will increase accountability, oversight, and efficiency, promoting more hands-on management of our heating assets and faster resolution of issues. This reorganization builds on the increased oversight created by the heat desk, which is a 24/7 operation established that monitors potential service disruptions from various data and dispatches staff accordingly. Other ways we improved heat services for residents include implementing a 24/7 staffing model for repair teams, establishing or activating the situation room when necessary to expedite service restoration, and enhancing our staff training. Additionally, we have modernized heating controls at 48 developments, which involves the installation of a building management system and apartment temperature sensors. We are in the process of completing this work at an additional 12 developments. Apartments that were typically overheated are now at a more comfortable range of 72 to 74 degrees during the day and 69 to 71 degrees at night. With the heat coming on in cycles to prevent overheating and underheating and to reduce energy costs. We can also monitor building temperatures and heating systems and hot water systems in real time at these developments. We also enhanced our communication with residents, and that involves ensuring that residents are notified of outages through building flyers and robocalls, enabling residents to automatically let us know if they are still experiencing a service disruption when they receive a service restoration robocall. We can then address any lingering issues. And posting information about outages on our website and social media. Residents can also get notifications about outages on their smartphones via our upgraded My NYCHA app. We added additional triage questions that residents are asked when they submit heat complaints via the Customer Contact Center, CCC, or My NYCHA app. With this additional data, we can more effectively deploy the appropriate staff to complete repairs. We do request that all residents report issues they are experiencing through either the CCC or My NYCHA app, so we can most effectively identify and respond to issues. The challenge in their solutions: our heating operation is vast, and our infrastructure and buildings are old. Despite the improvements to the way we work, aging infrastructure remains a significant obstacle. The average age of our boilers is 26 years old, beyond the 20 to 25 year average expected useful life of a boiler. Beyond boilers, it is often issues with heat distribution systems and heating components that cause outages. That is why our work of boiler overhauls and preventative inspections and maintenance is critical to the delivery of heating services to residents. We have identified funding to address some of the issues. Through 2026, we are replacing 346 boilers across 76 developments, thanks to $3.4 billion in city, state, and federal funding. We will address an additional nearly 900 boilers at over 100 developments through the PACT program by 2026. Since 2019, we have replaced 82 boilers through capital projects and addressed over 250 boilers through PACT. And we're not just replacing in kind, but are putting in place more effective systems. For instance, to improve hot water service, we are incorporating modern designs in our new heating plants, decoupling hot water equipment from heating equipment so that issues with one do not affect the other. Where possible, we are moving away from steam generating hot water systems by developing geothermal energy and electric heat pumps, and improving the building envelope through window replacements, advancements that help reduce outages, enhance systems performance, benefit the environment, and keep residents safe and comfortable. Through the Clean Heat for All Challenge, a collaboration between NYCHA, the New York Power Authority, and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, an additional $70 million investment will result in the development and production of 30,000 new heat pumps for NYCHA residents. This environmentally friendly, easily installable technology will provide reliable heating and cooling for thousands of residents. We invested more than $300 million in energy performance contracts, replacing boilers, and modernizing heating systems at 70 developments. We are also taking advantage of direct install programs where local vendors repair and replace apartment radiator valves and traps at no cost to NYCHA. The work is funded by the local utilities. These efforts improve steam distribution and residents' comfort. But for the bulk of our portfolio, the aging infrastructure presents near daily challenges, and there is no funding to address it. Through preservation programs like PACT and the Trust, however, we can generate the funding needed to provide residents with fully upgraded heating systems and improved quality of life. In conclusion, one of our top priorities is to ensure that residents have adequate and consistent heat. NYCHA is committed to continuous improvement to overcome the challenges that are inherent to managing aging buildings, which have been underfunded for decades, and become a better landlord for our residents. That means looking back to see where we need to improve operationally, as we do each heating season. It also means looking ahead to see where we can strategically invest our limited funding and how we can raise to the significant funds needed through innovative approaches like PACT and the Trust. While we may not yet be where we need to be, we are making progress. As the federal monitor Bart Schwartz stated in his recent reports, NYCHA has made significant upgrades to its overall heating program, which among other things led to a much more effective off-season maintenance program this past summer. He also said these planned improvements represent a substantial commitment by NYCHA to improve its heating services. NYCHA has quickly begun work on many of these initiatives, including obtaining funding for much of the proposed staffing increases and revamping its entire heat staff training process. The Council's partnership is vital to our continued progress. We thank you for your support as we work to improve the quality of life for NYCHA residents, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and I'd like to recognize our being joined by Councilmember Barron. Thank you, Councilmember. Is there? Okay, great. So I think we will jump into some questions. So I certainly have some questions related to your, to the testimony that you just provided to us, but I'm gonna kind of go back to some basics first. Can you tell us, how does NYCHA identify issues with their heat operations before a significant outage occurs?
So, thank you for your question, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. We, through our summer overhaul program, we identify areas that potentially have need by identifying these critical items and infrastructure that need replacement. In doing so, we're able to kind of target where we need to have extra attention. Additionally, after every heating season, we compile a list of our 25 worst performing plants. And in doing so, we put extra resources into those plants the following overhaul season. It's predictive, and it allows us to attempt to solve the problem before it happens.
So in terms of all the mechanisms, all the mechanisms across the NYCHA portfolio are asset tagged, and we know the condition. The full inventory has been done on all of the mechanisms across NYCHA.
Yeah, so we're obviously aware of all of our heating equipment. I think what we're working on is, tying those into the asset management system, but we are fully aware of all of our heating infrastructure is.
Got it. And in terms of, obviously, a 37% reduction in this heating season, and certainly reducing the time period in this heating season, obviously is a great start, and we hope that we'll maintain it, given that we are still very early, and the cold has yet to truly come. So, I'm glad we're off to a good start this year. How many, you noted 5,000 pieces of equipment, but how many boilers are in NYCHA?
Right, so the 5,000, thank you for your
Our
question.
boilers.
Yeah, so the 5,000 pieces of heating equipment represent our heating pumps, vacuum tanks, hot water systems, but the answer to number of boilers is 1,281.
And on average, how long does it take to inspect the boilers?
So I'll ask Javier to give the rundown.
Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. So on average, the overhaul and inspection process takes approximately 3 to 5 days on newer equipment and can take several weeks on our older equipment. And it's pretty much the amount of time it takes is pretty much based on the amount of follow-up work that's required. Naturally, our older equipment requires far more follow-up than our newer equipment. And therefore, most of the time is spent with our older equipment.
So I would assume that a good proportion of the equipment is older.
That's correct.
And so on average, it could take several weeks just for an inspection of the
Well,
equipment.
the inspection entails the repairs that are required with that. So when we perform the annual overhaul and inspection process, as Keith mentioned earlier, we lubricate, we clean, we adjust, we repair and replace worn components to restore the equipment's reliability. Preserve the equipment's reliability, rather. And in terms of our boilers, that process requires us to take the equipment apart, open it up, clean it internally and externally. Our oldest pieces of equipment are hot water generators and primarily our boilers as well. And the follow-up repairs on our boilers can be anything from major boiler welding or extensive plumbing repairs as well.
Got it. And in terms of, I'm sorry, I wanted to go back quickly to the 37% reduction. Does that include both unplanned and planned outages?
Yeah.
Thank you. In terms of, I guess I was wondering, obviously we're early in the heating season, wondering if any patterns have started to emerge in terms of the existing or potential heat outages, and what might we anticipate for the remainder of this winter season? Obviously, you have your target list of the. I'd love to hear the developments, the top 25 developments with the poorest performance, but I'd like to hear more about what you're anticipating this winter season.
Yeah, absolutely, and we can provide that to you afterwards as a follow-up. So thank you for that. I think that's a great question. So some trends that we are seeing is using our analytics, we are sending the right folks earlier, and that leads to that lower restoration number. So through the additional questions asked by the CCC, through our knowledge of the heating systems, we're able to send the right staff based on the repair needed. So that's significant. But what we're seeing as far as what's causing the service disruption is primarily related to our distribution equipment. We talk a lot about boiler replacements and how that relates to improved service. But we are putting new boilers into original heat distribution equipment, which includes piping, radiators, pumps. Pumps are replaced fairly regularly, but the piping is still most likely original to the building. So where we're seeing our significant outages, they are related to distribution.
And in terms of, in thinking about the ways all these heating issues arise, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Bronx River Senior Housing Development and the heating issues that they faced in the winter of 2021. It seems that the seniors living in that development didn't have heat for months, and as the winter went on, remained unaddressed. Pipes burst, caused flooding in the development. I suspect the distribution system clearly was in shambles. And I'm sure that many of the seniors living there, it was probably one of the worst winters they had ever experienced. Can you walk us through a few things related to that instance? Can you tell us what the source of the heating failure was at Bronx River? How did it get to that point where pipes were bursting? Why did the development experience no heat for such an extended period of time? And I have several other questions.
So I can give you the high level answer for that, Chair. Thank you. So to start with, obviously the deterioration is rooted in disinvestment in over a number of years, and the dire need for that capital funding that we were both spoken about in our opening statements. To Bronx River specifically, it's an older type of system. It's called a hydronic loop. So essentially there is a heating source, right? It provides steam up through the building, and it's a continuous loop. Every time there's a leak, you have to turn the whole system down. You have to repair the leak, then you have to recharge the system. And often what we find in those older loop systems is that recharging the system leads to another leak. Also, as I mentioned, this is original piping. Constantly heating, expanding, and contracting, heating and cooling puts fatigue on those pipes. And what we find with the hydronic loop systems across the city was that the constant expansion and contraction can create issues. What we did this year was looked at the developments where there are hydronic loop systems. And what we did, we ran a preseason test. We actually pressurized the lines to try to identify any leaks so we could do it while it was warmer, we could make some repairs. We were fairly successful. We found a leak here or there. We made some repairs, and thus far, we are still seeing some distribution issues, but we're at least a little bit more aware right through that preseason test. So late September, right before the heating season, we pushed that information out as well.
And how many of the systems are this loop system currently?
Well, we have 669 package-style boilers. The exact number of loop systems, I don't want to misspeak. I don't have that exactly. But I relate the package boilers to the hydronic loop systems because the package boilers are the ones that support that type of system primarily. But we can.
Right. And so I'll add to that. The buildings of that age with that system that we did the pre-test on, it was specifically in some of our more vulnerable populations. I believe the number, I will correct after the fact, was around 10. And we ran those tests. We're going to pull that number for you now. Additionally, there's some, just to go back to Bronx River, there's some additional associated plumbing issues related to that building, right, that were not only heating related. There was, leaks in waste stacks and sewage lines, leaks in domestic hot water lines. And the plumbing issues overall, unrelated to heat, created some significant downtime, right? Because we had to shut down the heating system to get into a space where it was too hot and make it safe for our workers to work.
Right. I think what it does is also beg the question on whether a development like the Bronx River, like where it fared in the queue, and how NYCHA uses the criteria of a vulnerable population, right? and why it was allowed to get to that point, given the deterioration, given what we know. So how are we making those real-time assessments? And curious around like, what temporary relief did NYCHA offer to the tenants in that situation to resolve the problem? Were there temporary boilers that were put in? So like, how does it get that bad is what we're getting at.
So I'll let Javier talk about the temporary relief, but so I think at Bronx River Edition, it wasn't that, I would say we went significant amount of time where we were able to provide consistent heat, but it wasn't like there was like weeks where there were no heat. In fact, I remember Christmas Eve specifically, where Javier and I were on the phone like all day because it was restored, out, restored, out, restored, out. And the reason for that is that if you looked at the boiler system, it actually isn't running all that bad or all that uncharacteristic of a NYCHA development. But if you look at the plumbing behind the walls, it is unfortunately even worse than, way worse than even, most of our developments. It is a complete stack failure. And we, and Javier's team would go out and they would break walls and replace piping here. But unfortunately, the pipes are so brittle that once they touch the pipes on, floor number 8, they break in floor number 5, and that's why we were seeing this restoration and also restoration outage during the course of that day on Christmas Eve. And it wasn't just Christmas Eve, but it's the day that stands out to me. We must have had 5 or 6 outage, restoration outage, to the point where it was, I was even afraid to report it out because I didn't know how long it would hold. To the residents there, we have spent tremendous amount of time with them, both, in public meetings, inside people's apartments, and we are now going to, unfortunately, have to vacate the building.
Right.
And we're offering, tenants relocation. The relocation first will be to Bronx River proper, but other folks have asked for relocation in other NYCHA developments, and other people have said, you know what, I think I'm ready to start something new, and ask for vouchers. And we have accommodated folks on all levels with that. It was incredibly difficult because these are seniors. And, we literally sat with meetings where people were crying because they were like, it is not only physically difficult, but it's also psychologically difficult to not know what you're going to expect. But Javier's team almost lived at Bronx River Edition, last year. But this is something that I fear is Bronx River Edition is not all that unique. It's just the first one. And it is NYCHA's biggest problem in many ways is the things we aren't seeing. It's the things that are behind the walls, the plumbing that causes so many issues, not only with heat, but also with mold, with deterioration, in terms of leaks, and with, many other issues that we're seeing that are result of aging plumbing that is usually original to the building. And I don't know if Javier have anything to add.
So I want to make a quick clarifying statement. So you asked about mobile boilers and how they can help. Mobile boilers are a great piece in the toolbox, but they're only the steam generation part of the puzzle, right? They don't solve the distribution problem.
Right.
If they did, we would probably
good.
have more of them, right? No, but they do provide a service, right? They do what they're supposed to do, but we cannot do so without piping in place. I just want to clarify.
No, thank you for the
Yeah.
clarification. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues. Councilmember De La Rosa has joined us, Councilmember Lincoln Ressler, and on Zoom, we have Councilmember Sanchez and Councilmember Juan. In terms of, you know, I have talked to several of the remaining Bronx River tenants, and, you know, NYCHA has certainly made an effort to meet the tenants where they are, and having the relocation support person on site, it made a huge difference for the residents there. And so, you know, I know this is very traumatizing for those residents. You know, I just keep them at the top of our minds, and hopefully we can continue to make, you know, relocation as painless as possible and as close to what they know as home as possible. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And we have, as you know, there's 11 residents remaining, and we will have staff fully stationed there until they're out, comfortable in their new home.
and what's the time frame around that? I mean, as we enter again another potentially terrible winter season, what's the remedy for those residents to make sure that they are safe?
So I think a lot of it is we are really going by an individual family approach in these apartments, and really, you know, making sure that people are ready to go. For some of these families, this has been their home for, you know, even though it's a senior development, they've lived there for 20 years in some cases, and so and since we're literally going inside people's apartments and saying, like, where is it that you want to go? How is it that you want us to pack up your stuff? You know, I mean, do you have support in this area? Because, you know, seniors, need to go places where they're close to their doctors, they're close to their churches, they're close to their friends and families, and they have a support system. And so working with families individually, it has definitely slowed the process down, but it's worth it because we're gonna make sure that people are located, in places where they're comfortable with. The fact that we're down to 11 families is really encouraging, and we believe that we will, by this heating season, all 11 will be, moved.
Got it. We'll stay on top of it and tracking it closely. I'm going to ask a few more questions, and then I'd be happy to open it to my colleagues who I know are very busy.
And also,
yeah.
Councilmember, too, we send the Councilmember Ferris a weekly report, and we can send this committee the same thing on Bronx River Addition, on the number of families who have been moved this week and the number of families still pending. So
Yes, and they have a very active TA, so they're keeping me posted.
Norma keeps us busy. Yes.
on progress for
Yes.
sure. We alluded to this a little earlier, what developments are on the worst performance heating list in terms of their equipment? And what are the plans to replace them? And where are they in the process?
So actually, I'm going to ask our colleague Joyce Cinderbrand to talk about some of our worst performances, specifically the process to replace those boilers, and then we can, when she's answered that part of the question, we'll give you our worst performers from last year.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there today. I'm unfortunately sick, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the work that NYCHA is doing to improve its heating portfolio.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do need to re-administer the oath before you give your response to the question. If you can bear with me, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you so much. You can proceed.
So Keith, thank you for handing that over. I wanted to start off by saying NYCHA is really committed to making as many investments as quickly as possible in the developments that are in need of them. As Keith and Javier have talked about, there really is a very long list of developments that have been underfunded and underinvested for decades. And so the progress that we're making is really aligned with our goals in the HUD agreement. Since we signed that agreement in 2019, we have made we've had over 360 boilers replaced between NYCHA and our PAC program. And then we have another 700 that are in the queue at 108 developments, both for NYCHA managed properties and through the PACT program. So we're really looking by 2026 to make sure that we've addressed the worst of the heat and hot water systems. I think what's critical is back to the example that you gave, Councilmember, is that replacing the boiler doesn't necessarily solve all the problems, and we do need additional investment for these developments to make sure that the distribution systems at the development and the support systems for the heating portfolio can really serve the residents.
Thank you so much, Joy. Can I, when you say there are 700 in the queue, what does that mean specifically? And what I'm really looking for is to understand what is realistically and feasibly going to be addressed in this, coming calendar year. I think residents here, they're in the queue that is unending, and they experience, they continue to experience kind of outages. So can you tell me specifically what is going to be targeted and addressed in this coming heating season?
Well, let's talk about the calendar year, because we tend not to necessarily do the most impactful part of heating replacement work during the heating season, because we want to make sure residents have consistent and reliable heat. But I gave two categories of investments. So the NYCHA managed portfolio is under a commitment through the HUD agreement to have 346 boilers replaced by the end of 2026. And we've been using this boiler replacement number, but I actually want to reinforce that we're actually moving away from one-to-one boiler replacement from centralized boiler plants. We're moving towards some of the more sophisticated and energy efficient equipment that Keith had described, and that Vlada can describe certainly more, so that residents have really the latest state-of-the-art technology, both through their heating systems, if it's for a building or a development, but sometimes it's going to be apartment based, so really serving their individual apartment, and that's a really critical shift for NYCHA. We're looking at the NYCHA portfolio and the NYCHA capital work to get 121 more boilers done in calendar year 2023. And that gets us on track, that has us on track to meet the HUD agreement goal of 346 boilers in 2026. The other number I gave is the number that NYCHA is doing with its partners in the Permanent Affordability Commitment Together program. And so there's another 100 developments that are getting, 700 boilers. These developments tend to be smaller buildings that have individual boilers in their buildings. That's why there's so many boilers for that number of developments. But really the goal is to hit as many developments as possible, as quickly as possible, recognizing, as I think you're implying, that the market does have a constraint, and we have to phase this out so that it can be done realistically with the budget we have and with the market's capacity to actually construct these.
And in terms of the boilers that are in I guess those developments that are in the PACT program, those aren't necessarily improvements who are capitalized by NYCHA. That is the private management company, right? That's right. Yeah.
Well, I think what I want to sort of make sure we're recognizing is that residents are going to have improved heating systems, and whether that's constructed through NYCHA's Asset and Capital Management Division, or whether that's done through a partnership with PACT, or whether it's done through a pilot program with NYSERDA or NYPA, we're getting these systems rolled out as quickly as we can. And so the goal is to have all of those parallel channels happening at the same time so that we can get residents the improvements they need as quickly as possible.
And I think the point Joy makes so well is that we're taking advantage of wherever we can get funding. So whether it is through state funding, through funding that came with the federal agreement, whether it is through weatherization funding that comes from the state, whether it is partnerships with NYSERDA or partnerships with PACT. And yes, the PACT deals are not necessarily investments that NYCHA made, but they're making a huge difference, for the residents who benefit. Councilmember Ressler, joined us forever in his district at Independence Towers. There were mobile boilers there that were whenever the temperature, dipped below 32, we had a crisis. I knew that we were sliding down poles when Rabbi Needleman would, get in touch with me and say, we have an issue at Independence. And it also burned really dirty. So it was almost like we had a locomotive running in front of this building. And we now have a cleaner system. It's providing consistent heat. And the residents don't say, well, did NYCHA make this investment or did, a private entity make the investment? What the residents care about is that they're comfortable in their apartment. And, that's the goal.
Yeah, no, without question. Clearly, that's not a point of contention as ensuring that residents get what they need. I think what I'm particularly wanting to disaggregate here is the constant call for the need for capital, right? And there are, when developments are moved into the RAD Pact, right, it shifts the burden of that capital repair to the private management companies, right? Which effectively would allow NYCHA to shift its funding to a more concentrated group of developments, right? So your pie, the pie that NYCHA is managing isn't necessarily decreasing. That doesn't mean the needs are not increasing, but your pie is not decreasing. And so I think what I'm trying to drive as well, that is important, and we want every resident, regardless of the financial status, that provides capital repairs, to make sure they have safe and healthy homes and heated homes. I want to get a better grip on what NYCHA is doing with the capital resources that it currently has and how it is effectively targeting, right? Certainly the worst performers. We also know that those developments that were moved into RAD Impact are also not the worst performing developments, right? The ones that need the most care, although certainly needed care, as you
Sure.
point out, in Independence. So I think that's what I want clarity on, this aggregating here. How much of the portfolio that is under duress, under NYCHA's direct hand, is getting addressed?
So, especially with state and city funding, what we look to, and with the investments that were made, in those portfolios, each of our boilers are marked, graded, 5 being like the worst performer, way past the shelf life, needs investment yesterday. 1 being a boiler plant that is operating, it's a pretty modern system and it is good shape. So when we worked it out with the state and we worked out with the city on where they're going to invest the money, we gave them our 5s and 4s, developments that are already past their shelf life or approaching that. And that's what we want to make sure that investment was targeted to. And so we saw, many plants where, they had, 5 boilers and 3 of them are already offline, and we're like holding the whole thing together with duct tape and glue. But those are the places where we're going to see, investment. So it wasn't just, we wanted to make sure that we had a metric of where the investment was going. It wasn't just going to the loudest voices. It was going to where there was the most need.
Will you be providing the council with that list? And
Sure.
I really want to understand specifically, of these 121 boilers that we expect to come online in 2023, and I do understand that that is not the complete picture to ensure heating. So I heard you. But in terms of those 121, the 5, are these all 5s and 4s, and where are they specifically in the entire portfolio? I'd like to know development specific information.
Sure. I'm going to go back to Joy on that. So.
You're on mute, Joy.
Thank you. I couldn't unmute myself. Sorry about that. Thank you for that question. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about our capital planning process. So as Brian mentioned, as NYCHA gets access to funding, we have a rubric that allows us to really highlight the developments that have the most need. And this takes into account outage information that we have from the customer care center. It takes into account the information that Javier and his staff can bring to us based on where they're investing the most of their time and their money to keep those systems going. We also have complaint information, and then we use that to prioritize those developments. One of the things that we're doing, you mentioned being strategic, is we're aligning our prioritization of those developments with our understanding of the PAC pipeline. So really trying to make sure that we're addressing a development either in one pipeline or the other, and keeping those projects moving. At this point, though, there are certainly additional developments that need investment to the distribution systems and the support systems for the boilers, and we don't have the funding for all of those projects, and so we continue to prioritize using the data sources that we have available.
And if I may add, Joy's team and, on the capital side and the operational team, Javier and myself, we meet regularly. We meet every 2 weeks. We discuss the ongoing projects, and we understand. So an example of this is if the capital team is working on a project, we may refer repairs back and forth between the two. Our worst performer with outages last year was Wagner. It wasn't on the capital list necessarily, but knowing that there was going to be no capital funds available, we made operational investments through different vendors and provided extra attention. And actually, this year it's not even on our list of outages.
Okay.
Right. So by providing that extra attention through both overhaul and the capital process, we find this. We kind of are trying to strike this balance where we're putting in the additional work and focusing to make sure that there's constant heat. So our top performers last year, it was Wagner. It's not on the list this year.
So with that, I'd like to turn it over to council. Actually, acknowledge being joined by Councilmember Diana Ayala, and then thank you for being here, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Barron.
Thank you very much, Chair. I always appreciate your steadfast being on top of these issues. This is very critical to all our residents in NYCHA. When I read the reports and then I live the reality, there's some disconnect. So in the reports, it's improvement here, we're doing well here, we just need a little more money for this, a little more money for that. One thing I do realize is that the federal government, the state and city government are not given enough money to deal with these obligations. And this place is loaded with money. So I am very angry at the city council that has a $94.7 billion capital budget, and it's just a minimal amount given to NYCHA. The state has a $60 billion capital budget, a minimal amount. Chuck Schumer, I'm talking about $80 billion, or maybe went from $40 billion to $80 billion. And when we don't see that kind of money coming in, it's a problem. On top of that, when money does come in, management is a problem at NYCHA. I didn't see you shake your head that time. Oh, because you shook your head for not having the money, but I didn't see you shake your head for the management. Did you see the head stop shaking?
Sir. We acknowledge.
And I just noticed the head stopped shaking. But management is a problem. I have several developments like Pink Houses, Boulevard, Linden Houses, Brookline, Brook Ellen, Cypress, Penn Workman. When they shifted to PAC, they thought everything was going to be so much better. And so far, it hasn't been up to their expectations. We're having a meeting tonight at Linden Houses. They did the outside facades to make it look different, and I'm not sure that little cheap stuff is better than the bricks, but they did some outside facade instead of pointing the bricks, which is much better than the fake stuff they put up there, and then some inside the house little things. But when it came to the boilers, when they first came in, they had issues, as you remember, when they first came in. So even though you're saying PAC is providing this and that, by the way, for record, I was against that. I think that we should have resident management. If money can be shifted from Section 9 to Section 8, then resident management, and you can get them up to snuff to manage their own residents. But PAC has been a problem. it's been a real challenge. We're going to face some of those things tonight. So I just want to know, the thing that has been for the 2 decades I've been dealing with NYCHA is the distribution system. That's the big problem. And I see we mentioned boilers, but boilers are only as good as the distribution system. So if you put the boilers in and the system ain't right, we have a major, major issue. So I just want to know if you can give me an update on ones in my development. If you
Sure.
can send our office where we have 5, 4s, 1s, and
Yep.
what's happening in my development. And are y'all monitoring PAC more or just assuming, they are doing the right thing?
So, and thank you, Councilmember, and I've always appreciated even when you've been hard on us, it always is something that it's like he's right, so it's so we appreciate the constant, I would say, call to do better, and I think that's what I think on the heating side, and I think it's on a lot of things in terms of NYCHA, that we have two-pronged problem, right? You're 100% right. We have a funding problem that everybody knows about, and we also have a management problem as well. And we acknowledge that as well. The heating team, though, I have seen improvements in the way they're managed. And I really would love for the committee to come to Long Island City to see the way they are managed, much different. They're using 21st century technology in order to be able to monitor, temperatures inside buildings, without having to send staff, immediately out there. So when they can see it, from Long Island City, it definitely helps. It's 24 hours now. We all remember a time when, a resident would call at 1 o'clock in the morning and they'd say, call back at 8. That's unacceptable. If you're cold at 1 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't matter if you're cold then or if you're cold at 1 p.m. We need to respond. They're 24 hours, 7 days a week. They also have more teams that are local. If everybody was based out in Long Island City and you're all the way out in Canarsie, how long does that take to get out there and get teams out there? So we are doing things, I think, smarter. And the management end, I think we are definitely handling things. The 2 developments that you mentioned, Pink Houses is getting a new boiler system. But the thing that we see at Pink and at Brook Allen, they're both huge developments. I mean,
Right.
so when you have those developments that are really large, the distribution becomes even more of a problem.
Yes.
Because when you have a central heating plant and you need to get, Brook Allen, I think, is like 17 acres.
Okay.
So getting, the heat from one end of the development to the other is a tremendous challenge.
What about Long Island Baptist?
Long Island Baptist, Mr. Warren complains about a lot of things at
Yes.
Long Island Baptist, but heating isn't something I hear as much. But that is only one building, so that, well,
That's
it's like
not as
two or
much.
three
Two or three,
buildings,
right.
excuse me, it's a much smaller development. So it is, not as much of an issue. On the PACT and RAD, we're 1 year in on PACT and RAD in your district. We do monitor them closely. I usually think on those projects, it's usually the second year we can really judge them because it's still like an ongoing construction
Yeah, but the
project.
only problem with that is you judging them on the second year. We're cold on the first year.
That is true.
And
That
we're
is
cold
true.
on the first
I'm,
day.
I'm not
So
saying
why-
that, yeah.
So why y'all do these kinds of evaluations? When we look at the macro picture
Mm-hmm.
and evaluating things, it's a disconnect from the everyday reality that a resident has to live through. And you know how many times I've
Yep.
called you with heating problems and all of that,
100%.
and countless times. So while we see all of these studies and all of these reports, and let's go to Long Island, whatever, every day it's a real serious problem in NYCHA, and I'm just concerned. We're coming up on January and February, and I'm really concerned if we're going to do something different than what's been happening thus far, particularly in the ones in my district, because I have huge developments.
You do.
And when you have huge developments, new boilers, have to be connected to a decaying distribution system.
That's right.
And that causes major problems. Something has to be done about that.
So I don't imagine anytime in the near future where we are going to be in a place where we're going to say heating is not a challenge for NYCHA. It will be because of the aging infrastructure. I think where it is on us, and I think where we've made improvements, is the way we manage it, is the way we staff it, is the way we look at it from a strategic angle. And I think we're doing better. Those are the areas we're doing better. But it will always be, it will be a challenge for a number of reasons, largely because of, aging, largely also because of, some things. But I think, you're going to see improvements this year compared to
Well,
last year.
that's very important because Malcolm X taught us that if someone stabbed you in the back and the knife is 9 inches in your back and you take it out 6 inches and say, hey, got some improvement here,
Right.
we still fatally wounded.
That is true.
So we just want to make sure that you don't see your progress as that we should be dancing in the street about, because
I don't think
your
that's what we're saying.
progress, your improvement doesn't mean that those of us who, and I lived in the NYCHA development. I grew up in the Lillian Walled houses and right across the street from Jacob Reese that had all of those challenges. And I know what it is, to deal with no heat in the wintertime. So
No, our statistics don't mean anything to, a senior at Corsi houses is really
Exactly.
cold.
Exactly.
So like, so the statistics don't make them feel any warmer. But, so our obligation is to make sure that everybody is, within, in apartments that are, where the temperatures are above the legal
and
limit.
stay on top of pack, because they talking a good talk, but the walk is different.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. I'd like to recognize that we have Councilmember Osei on Zoom, and I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Ressler for his questions.
Thank you so much, Chair Aviles. I really, as always, just appreciate the exceptional job you've been doing leading the Public Housing Committee. We all of the residents in the 7 NYCHA developments in the 33rd, we appreciate the work that you've been doing here. I really want to follow up on what Councilmember Barron was focusing on, which I think is critically important. The highlighting of the replacement of the boilers is really important, and these are vital investments, and NYCHA deserves credit for replacing boilers at meaningful scale across our system because, as you noted, Brian, I do not understand how you have a personal relationship with every tenant leader in the city of New York, but it's really quite impressive. But as you were noting, I've been going to Independence Towers when the heat's gone out since when I had brown hair, which is a long time ago. And, it is an extraordinary relief to the residents of those towers to finally have a functional heating system. Nothing brings me more joy than to go down to their new boiler plant and to see the state-of-the-art investment that they've received and they're benefiting from. I have lots of concerns about the RAD program, but I am very pleased with the heating infrastructure that we have in that development, and my tenants value it enormously, and rightly so. But what concerns me is when I go to the NYCHA developments in my district, like Gowanus Houses, where finally we're seeing the boilers replaced, but the distribution system isn't being upgraded, and the resources haven't been dedicated. So you're fixing the boilers, but if we haven't actually invested in the piping and the infrastructure to get the heat out to the buildings in the development, then what's it good for, right? I mean, it's good for something, but it's not good for enough, and we're still gonna have issues. I continue in the, I can send you all the text messages I get at Saturday morning at 2 a.m. where we don't have heat in Taylor Wythe or where we're having issues in Gowanus. I was out this last year's winter, more times than I can count when we had heating outages at Gowanus. So, not more times than I can count, but multiple times. I don't mean to say something inaccurately. So, I appreciate Chair Aviles' highlighting 121 new boilers being invested in 2023. Can you speak to the distribution systems for those developments and more comprehensive investments beyond just simply the boiler upgrades?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember. So to kind of clarify your point a little bit, so as we.
Sorry, I just have to pause you. These
No,
two
sure.
council members both grew up in Lillian-Wald. Isn't that
Really?
extraordinary? I didn't know that.
Really?
There you go. All right, so we got to do an event to celebrate at Lillian-Wald soon. But I apologize, as you were saying.
So, thank you for that. So we, to kind of compound your point and drive it home, right? So it's not just the piping within the buildings. As we get into these large development structures, we have underground steam leads, right? As you walk around NYCHA development, you've probably seen them before, the candy cane vent, which is relieving pressure from an underground steam main to avoid undermining. It's significant. It is costly, it is unfunded, and we use these to make sure that the heating system continues to run and prevent any backfeed into our boiler rooms. The current tally on this is on replacement of these items is about $37 million, and that's for a number of them across the city. To your second question, I'd actually like to bring in my colleague Vlada Kenneth. I think she'll need to be sworn if that's okay, to talk about some of our how we're looking forward with some different systems, whether they be geothermal or some of our heat pump systems that we're very excited about.
Great. So am I.
Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you. You may begin.
Hello, I'm Vlada Kniff. I'm the Senior Vice President for Sustainability at NYCHA. And distribution has been a huge concern, particularly for my team, as well as combustion-based gas-fired boilers. We want to get away from combustion technologies that are original to the vintage of the buildings. And so, as soon as I came into my role, we started to look at alternatives. We've piloted some technologies and realized very quickly that the clean heat technologies that are currently on the market are far more expensive than boiler replacements. And so typically the budgets that we get only really get us a boiler replacement. And so we quickly realized that if we are serious with local law 97 compliance and really providing clean heat to our buildings and changing them, we would have to essentially change the market. And so we last year had released what's called the Clean Heat for All Challenge to HVAC manufacturers and asked them to create a unit that would actually compete with the cost of boilers and would be easy to install in our buildings without having to upgrade electrical work. The electrical work is, as many of you know, extremely costly, especially post-COVID. And so we are very proud to say that we had two very qualified respondents. Gradient is a startup out of California, and Medea America, who's established HVAC manufacturer, and they've created these really excellent units that are U-shaped. They'll go over a windowsill, and they will provide both heating and cooling. Our first development where we are have mobilized to do this work to pilot approximately 30 of these, of each one of these manufacturers is Woodside. And we are hoping to get through one heating season, make sure that it works for our residents, it works for our operational staff, it works for our heating department, and our intention is to purchase 30,000 of these. They are funded.
They're funded.
They are funded, and we will essentially be creating a market. We have understood that NYCHA's scale can create a market, and so we carefully crafted the specifications, carefully worked with the HVAC community to understand what's on the market, what could happen very, very quickly, and then develop a product that is UL listed and tested and is safe and can provide, again, both heating and cooling and really allow us to get away from having to talk about distribution issues and boilers forever.
Well, that's very promising to hear and excited to learn more. you know, we're going through a comp mod process at Gowanus and Wyckoff right now, where we're doing work. We're going to be doing work in the next couple of years to improve apartments, kitchens, and bathrooms. It certainly feels like it's the right opportunity for us to also be addressing the heating issues, whether it be through upgrades of the piping or potentially installation of these new HVAC units that you've described. I'm a huge advocate for heat pumps. Would love to see NYCHA be leading the way in sustainable energy, and think that 30,000 is a big number and is a very positive thing. So excited to hear how things go at Woodside this winter. Maybe Julie will let us come out for a site visit with her at Councilmember Juan. This is critically important, and happy to hear that there's some areas of some positive new developments. There's a geothermal tower getting built on the Greenpoint waterfront with 800 plus units that I'm really excited about. If you're ever interested in meeting with the development team there and how they're making geothermal work in New York City in, it's new development, but in a new skyscraper, we'd love to connect you. We want to be, NYCHA should be leading the way here. Oftentimes, NYCHA residents are forgotten, left behind, get the worst environmental outcomes on like heating and gas policies. They should be at the front of the line.
Yeah, we also believe in that very much so, which is why we, launched the Clean Heat for All challenge. We also do have 2 geothermal installations at Jackson and Eastchester Gardens for domestic hot water. So we're really, really excited about that. We are pursuing additional funding everywhere that we can. And with the onset of IRA, it is very, very important that we continue to do that. I think also the Clean Heat for All challenge will allow us to position ourselves to be able to pursue some of that funding that will become available. Again, there's not a ton of information that's available to have certainty around it, but I think that the fact that we are being proactive puts us in a very good position.
Great. I would love, and I'll shut up, Chair Aviles, thank you for giving me a moment to speak over the time allotted, but I'd love for you to meet with our office and the CompMod team to discuss how we can integrate some of this work in Gowanus and Wyckoff in particular, because it feels like a real opportunity while we have major capital projects happening there.
Thank you, Council Member.
Thank you.
And Councilmember, actually, I would love to bring our heating team out there to see how they're operationalizing it once it was installed. That's something that we're still kind of working through here. So to see somebody who's successfully using it would be really helpful.
Oh, yeah, we'd love that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ressler. I can't underscore enough everything that you just said. NYCHA residents, NYCHA should be at the front of the line, and I'd love to hear more around the pursuit of investment in these technologies and the creation of the market, because certainly with the size and scope and investment that we are going to be asking for, I'd love to hear more specifically what the NYCHA plan, advocacy plan is to request funding, how much funding it's requesting from the federal government and the state government to materialize and expand this work. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Diana Ayala.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Is it afternoon yet? I don't know. Good morning. It's been a long day already. But my question is regarding, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but I was at another hearing across the street, what the number of developments with portable boiler systems is, and the number of staff positions assigned to provide oversight of those developments.
So we have 33 mobile boiler assets and 25 are connected to developments currently. I can get the specific, for those specific developments, I can get you those numbers. But we have currently 565 heating staff assigned. I'll get you the numbers for the mobiles, for the developments with mobiles though.
565 heating staff. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I will say that, independent of what's happening at Wagner, I didn't get as many, my office didn't get as many heat-related calls last winter. I don't know if to attribute that to warmer weather or just because the systems were running somewhat better. I hope it's the latter. But I think that my biggest pet peeve here is that the lack of communication between NYCHA and the elected officials' offices to just give us a heads up. Oftentimes I'm finding out about these situations in the news. I'll turn on New York One, and there's one or two of my developments, and I haven't received word from NYCHA that this is happening. And most recently, Brian and I had a couple of conversations regarding Taft houses and an emergency situation that was occurring, and I'm not sure that it's been remedied permanently yet, but we had 3 or 4 days of outages where the entire building was had no electricity, which meant that they had no elevators, which meant that there were security concerns. And so I think that level of communication for me is key, is really important in order for me to be able to do what I have to do. For instance, in this case with Taft, there was a serious concern around safety. The buildings were pitch black. It was nighttime, and there was no portable light that was put in place to ensure that people could come in and out of the building. I'm sure as people were leaving work and and coming home, they were running into that situation, and it was pitch black, and that's dangerous. And there was just like those steps. I have trouble kind of gauging where NYCHA's what NYCHA's position is, like, right? What is the strategy here for these types of emergencies?
So, quickly on the Taft, I think we were learning about that at the same time, so I think that's why, there was no advance notice. Taft, those buildings were running on a generator. There were 2 buildings at Taft that were running on a generator. They are now back on the grid, so we're good. We're good there, but it was a really bad Friday to Sunday where we were having outages and on and off. The communication between we were definitely late to the communication, but once we did get this going, I had several conversations over the weekend with Beverly, the TA president there, and then on Monday. Where she was, really appreciative to you and your staff. And she said to me at the end, she said, it's the council member's office and you guys are the only ones I'm talking to. There's some other people here are just trying to create some trouble, but, she said that. But I think, we do try to send elected officials notices when we know of an outage coming. So it's if it's a planned outage. But there are some things that happen in real time, and I will continue to tell myself and my staff that we need to do a better job in those cases. But in that case, when it was pointed out to us, we were able to act pretty quickly there, and we're back in the grid there. So I'm happy with that.
Now, in regards to the number of outages, heating outages last year, am I correct in my observation? Were the number of complaints lower last year than they had been in previous years?
So our yes, every time. I used to work for the DOE. You think I'd be used to the bell, right? But so we are seeing less outages over this period last year. Less outages between this year in over the same period last year. I said that right? We have less outages this year than last year? Okay. Thank you. So we are seeing less. I think just to re-clarify again, right? The outages, the outages that whole section of a development, a single building, a stair hall, an apartment line, a hall, those outage numbers are down. Maybe are you referring to complaints being higher this year?
Are they lower? Are they, where do they have, I haven't.
Yeah, they're lower, right.
Yeah, because I'm saying, what I'm seeing in our office is that, we do get them sporadically, most specifically from like the larger buildings and some of the senior buildings, but not at the rates that that I've seen in the past. Like, I mean, you guys know, we've sat at meeting after meeting, just trying to come up with a strategy to prepare for the upcoming winter. And last year seemed to be pretty quiet. This year's, so far hasn't been that bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer your previous question, we will follow up with the staff assigned for mobile boilers. We'll follow up with you afterwards. We're consolidating it into those groups.
So the answer to the question regarding the number of
The number of
complaints.
staff assigned.
No,
Oh,
the
and
number of
I'm getting
complaints.
to that
So
right
the
now.
citywide complaints are down?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And I think that goes to a lot of what we're talking about, right? We have invested additional resources in overhaul. We have adjusted our overhaul process. And it goes to something that we started doing this year with some of our sites that have known significant numbers of complaints. We have set up Brian's team and my team and Javier's team have been meeting regularly with the resident associations so that we can hear their complaints. And actually, they've led to some resolution, right? We understand that there is the G line is constantly having an issue, as an example, and now we go in and really focus our efforts on the G line and fix the issue there.
Yeah, I've always found that interesting how one side of the building is
Yeah.
hot and the other side of the building is cold.
And right, and each, if we could get into the technical answer,
Yeah.
of course, but essentially, right, boiler, the steam comes out of the boiler. In a steam generated building, every system works a little differently, but the basic is it comes out of the boiler, goes into the distribution system, and then goes up risers in those buildings. Each riser typically has a zone valve that opens and closes based on temperature in BMS buildings, and we can manually adjust those. So, for example, one side of the building, all the zone valves might be working, and then one stair hall or one line has a zone valve that is malfunctioning, and we can go replace that zone valve.
Now, I'm sorry, I just have one more question, Madam Chair. In regards to the window replacements, because I know that at Corsi Houses, for instance, Ali Eason, who's the president there, had like really drafty windows, and her apartment was always freezing, and there seemed to be some sort of contract to replace all of the windows in that development, well, at least some. And hers was one. Her unit was one of those units where the windows were changed, and she said that it was like night and day. There was a significant, change in temperature in her apartment, and so I wonder, is that part of the capital plan moving forward? Is there an ongoing contract to replace, older, draftier windows?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a huge issue portfolio-wide, and Vlada could talk about it more, but Corsi is the perfect example. Like, I almost could set my alarm to usually like Saturday about 9 o'clock at night, where I would hear from folks at Corsi telling me that they're feeling cold. I would tell Javier and his team, they would send folks out there and they'd say, well, it's about 72 degrees in folks' apartments. It's true. Both things were true at the same time. People did feel cold, and it was 72 degrees in the apartments. But because the windows are so bad, it was like, if you were sitting anywhere close to the window, all you felt was that draft, So if we could have the boilers going, we could even have the distribution system going, but if you have the windows, then all the heat's going out the windows. It's, it's like banging your head against the wall. So that's part of a strategy, and Vlada could talk about that more.
Yes, thank you, Council Member, for that question. We have replaced some windows in a few developments through the Weatherization Assistance Program, state funding, and it is a limited number of buildings, and it does make a huge difference. We recognize that. Windows are very, very expensive. It is a core part of our Clean Heat for All strategy. Wherever we are pursuing the window heat pumps, we are also advocating for window replacement funding. We do think it's a critical part of sealing the building. So Woodside will get window replacements, and any other subsequent building where we are pursuing the window heat pump strategy will also get window replacements.
I appreciate that, and I just want to put out there that, because I get that you're looking at it from a management perspective, but when we're working with older adults and you put them all in one building, you should be mindful that older adults typically get colder faster and they get hotter faster because they don't have the same right? Layer of fat buildup that we do when we're younger, and so that makes them susceptible to weather changes. So where it might feel like it's 72, right? Like the temperature that you're reading may say that is 72. It may feel colder to the older adult population, and I think that making that distinction is really important. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Member. Unfortunately, Council Member Julie Wong could not ask her question directly, so this is a question from her. She is on Zoom. In terms of the Queensbridge houses, hot water and heat outages have been happening over the last 3 weeks. Why and how does NYCHA determine maintenance being contracted out? And Queensbridge heat and hot water maintenance has been contracted to a third-party vendor, GHS, instead of utilizing NYCHA's heating plant technicians. It seems that it has been taking even longer to fix. So also, what is the actual problem for Queensbridge heating plant? And is it on site or is there a heating plant? Is there a heating plant or a third party? And lastly, what is the latest update for Woodside Houses heating plant? We continue to get complaints for heat and hot water outages.
Copy. All right. So I'll start with
I
Queensbridge.
can repeat again.
No, it's okay. I think I have the gist of it. We've spoken about it a number of times. So part of the issue with the cause of the Queensbridge heat and hot water shutdowns, they're actually scheduled shutdowns typically during the day. We're working closely with our partners at DEP to try to minimize any inconvenience to residents on this, but they're actually doing a water main replacement on the street along Vernon Boulevard. So we've had a kind of a round of scheduled daily outages. I think part of the concern that she mentions with George S. Hall is actually once the water is returned, we go through a process with them, and we're coordinating with property management staff. The outage creation. Let me just talk about outage creation for a second. For a planned outage, right? DEP or DEC requests that planned outage. Obviously, we grant them that planned outage. We need a new water main. We understand, and then property management teams will create that outage, and you'll see it on our website, right? There's a little bit of some back end work, but that's how you see it. When service is restored, typically the recharge into the building with that water stream, they're actually physically shutting off the utility to the building, right? So the recharge into the building with that water stream may move some pipes, adjust some valves, and I think some of the issues that we had initially was the coordination on the return of service. So DEP may have finished a little bit later, a little bit early, and we may have lost communication with property management staff. So I think what we did kind of initially after that first really long outage was every day have communication between property management staff, George S. Hall, heating management staff, and we've actually seen it improved. Outages have been closed out, both actually closed out by returning service and closed out on the website more efficiently. And that's something that we've been working on. It was really a communication issue. That was Queensbridge. As far as Woodside,
I guess before
Yeah,
you
go
move
ahead, shoot.
before you move on to Woodside, I think so you addressed kind of maybe a process breakdown that happened. I think what my colleague is asking is how and why does NYCHA choose contractors? And in particular, why was GHS chosen instead of using in-house NYCHA workers?
for specifically for Queensbridge, but actually in general, right? We understanding that in general, we hired third-party contractors a number of years ago when we were faced with some low staffing numbers to supplement that and provide the service. as we mentioned in our testimony, our staffing numbers were increased this year. How that relates to third-party sites, we're still evaluating. However, what I want to just kind of note in here is that at this time, we have 54 candidates identified for a maintenance worker position. We're waiting on some start dates and availability for them. We need to schedule some, obviously, onboarding training for them for the heating department. And we have 13 HPTs in the pipeline, if I'm reading this correctly. So we're trying to increase that frontline staff and where we can deploy them appropriately. It's possible. We have the ability to move a third-party vendor once we have the appropriate headcount to cover that site, and we will do so.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is you use them because you had them on contract already.
We use
but
them because we needed them.
There were no allocations to the Queensbridge site of NYCHA staff. They were all deployed elsewhere.
No, so yeah, essentially,
Yeah.
Right. It's. We can stop there. Okay.
And in terms of that contract in particular, are you suggesting that as you begin to staff up, you can alter that contract? You can stop using contractors at any point in time?
So I think that's something that we're evaluating, and we're happy to keep the committee posted on that as over time. But as we increase headcount, it's potentially a measure that we are exploring, but we've made no decisions on it yet.
Are there any NYCHA employees from the heating unit that deploy specifically to Woodside? Or is it just the contractor? To Queensbridge.
Yeah, so we obviously work with the vendor, right? So the third-party contractor is responsible for the boiler room and the ancillary equipment like vacuum tanks and pumps. Typically what would happen is property management staff and property management maintenance workers will handle anything in the apartment, right? It's unfair of us to send a third-party contractor to a resident's apartment. We recognize that. We want them to work with NYCHA staff directly. On off hours, should we need assistance in an apartment or outside of that boiler room or ancillary equipment space, our heating roving teams will respond to those developments. We don't just leave them in a lurch. That's not how it works. Essentially, just to clarify my previous, third-party vendors. I think we were saying the same thing, but third-party vendors result in a more manageable workload for our HPTs, and that's why we use them. That was all.
I thought Brian needed to jump in.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to say, so you might remember 2017, we had a heating season that, made headlines that folks, really, it was a terribly cold winter, but at the same time, too, we were not prepared for it. At that, after that season, we did make the decision to augment our staff because we were terribly understaffed with private partners. In addition, many of these systems also have newer systems in place where they were better equipped to manage those boiler plants. But as we're staffing up, it is something that we have a few seasons behind us, and it's good to evaluate what's working about it, what's not working about it, and also too, whatever we're going to move forward with, just making sure that roles are defined. Because usually what happens is the tenant association or the management staff, people say like, well, I know the way it used to work always, but I'm not, even though we talk, it takes a little while for things to sink in when you change things. And it is just making sure that we're all on the same page.
Got it. Thank you. In terms of, let's see, make sure.
Woodside?
You mentioned the water main is being replaced, but did you touch on exactly what the actual problem for the Queensbridge heating plant is?
So
Did I get it? Did I miss it?
kind of. So what we need water to generate hot water,
So it's,
right?
it's
Without water, there's no
primarily
water.
that. It's
It's right. It's
Got
the,
it.
steam generating boilers require water for feed water, and when there's no water, it's so it's a compounding issue. Lack of water when needed to make heat.
Got it. So I guess what I wasn't capturing there was how much, in addition to the water main replacement, if there was actual problems also with the plant that are being addressed simultaneously.
No, we're not seeing problems with the plant
Okay.
outside of that, no.
Okay, great, thank you. In terms of, I guess the update for Woodside Houses heating plant?
Absolutely. I'll start with a recap and thank you, Councilmember Juan, wherever you are. Thank you for asking this question. So NYCHA completed prior to IDA. NYCHA completed $1.2 million in operational investments and upgrades to the boiler at Woodside Houses. They were damaged during that storm in September of 2021. As you know, the development has been running on mobile boilers. They have had consistent and adequate heat this heating season. In fact, we added an additional mobile boiler at the end of last heating season, working with council to get that, working with council through council's request to put that in place to provide an additional redundancy. There was one building outage that was planned. We were repairing a hot water generator this year, and there was one single outage this year that for heat and hot water. So we understand the urgency of the work being done, and we continue to invest resources and staff time to get the plant back online. Most recently, a smoke test was conducted on November 18th to ensure that the chimney is able to withstand the smoke that needs to be expelled from the building once the boiler room is brought back online. The smoke test was conducted by a vendor procured by Heating Management Services at a cost of about $45,000. Unfortunately, the test failed. All of these tests that we have gone through and all of the work that we have done are really to ensure the safety and security of our residents. Obviously, a leaking chimney with boiler output is probably not something we want folks ingesting, and that's the reason for all of these tests, right? So we take that seriously, and before we can go back online, all of these things need to be in place. Currently, we're waiting for the materials to make the repair to the chimney liner. They were ordered, and we are waiting for them to come in so that we can make the repair and hopefully clear this final hurdle. I can't give you a timeline because we don't know the amount of time it will take to get the materials in, but I do want to say this: we are providing adequate heat. We have some specific issues with residents in singular apartments. We respond to those issues as we would anywhere else. And we will continue to respond when tickets are put in, and we will continue to work with residents and our resident leadership there. We have done a significant amount of engagement with both the council and our resident leaders and our property management staff, and we've really worked as a team there to ensure that they understand every step of what's going on and gather their input.
Great, thank you for that. I hope Councilmember Juan's, your questions have been answered. In terms of, based on the data that we've collected from the NYCHA website, the median hours to resolve an unplanned heat outage increased from 7.35 hours in 2019-20 heating season to 7.97 in the 2021 heat season, and to 8.4 hours in the 21-22 heat season. What do you think is causing this increase?
So, as I mentioned earlier, we're actually coming back down into the 7-hour mark. So, we've made advances over the past several years to improve the delivery of heat and hot water services to residents. As you know, the legal requirement is return heat within 24 hours.
Right.
After the monitor agreement was put in place and the agreement was put in place, we agreed to do it in 12 hours, less than everybody else, and we're currently exceeding that by over 4 hours in that target. And we aim to continue to improve on there. Obviously, we would all like to sit here and say that there should be no heat outages. We know that's not possible. It's Murphy's Law, things will break, but what our goal is to keep well under that 12-hour mark, and thus far, as I said, we're about 37% below that.
So again, we applaud 50 days into the heating season that we have good grades.
We have work to do.
Nevertheless, the monitor's report did note that, I guess, that there wasn't a completion of the summer preventative maintenance program last year. Are these two things connected, and can you speak to that and explain why that did not happen?
Yeah, so I don't think that I want to correct the record on that slightly.
Okay.
We did complete our annual overhaul last year. I think we ran into some issues with it, but this year we took note of some areas where we were running behind, right? So we start our distribution earlier. We start our overhaul earlier. And I'd actually like to give you a full rundown because I think it paints a better picture on what we've learned from and how we've improved that process.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you for that question. So we did find that a lot of our problems were distribution in nature last year. And some of the things that we did differently this year during the annual overhaul process was, as Keith said, we did start earlier. We started with our hot water units in February. And we have two types of hot water systems. We have the instantaneous hot water heaters, and we have the hot water generators, which are large tanks. We start with the instantaneous units because it does allow us to take one side of the system down because these units have built-in redundancies, and it allows us for us to perform the overhaul process without creating a service disruption. Then from there, we moved into boilers in April. We look at our larger developments with multiple boilers, with 5 or more boilers, again, because they have built-in redundancies, and it allows us to take one boiler down and perform the overhaul on that equipment. Then from there, we moved into our distribution systems in May and continued through the summer months. But as I said earlier, we saw last year many outages related to distribution. So what we actually did different this year is we procured a vendor to perform some of the annual overhaul on the boilers at some of those sites where we saw increase in outages related to distribution, so that our staff that would normally perform that portion of the overhaul can focus more on some of the repairs on the distribution side. And that's been helping.
So is the plan moving forward, is the plan to bring that capacity in-house, or do you expect to continue to use contractors to supplement that capacity?
So I think this particular overhaul vendor, the plan is to continue using them and to adjust what they do, right? As this is a new process, and like as you stated previously, we are 50 days into heating season, and we want to see how that process runs. So do a full kind of after action on that. We do plan on continuing to use that overhaul vendor, but we are through that new headcount that we mentioned. We are evaluating not just having a lot of staff is great, but we're actually looking at that staff to see what kinds of staff we need. Right, there are certain staff with skilled trade backgrounds and certain skilled trades that would be very helpful: welding, boiler makers, steam fitters, plumbers, As you know, we've increased our plumbers and electricians in just the heating department, but looking to bring the right type of staff on is something that we're very serious about. So that way we can bring that in-house, right? There are some things that we have to send to a welder. There are certain filings that have to go out to a vendor. But wherever possible, we're trying to create that contingency in-house, so we always have that to fall back on.
Great. I guess we'll since we're talking about staff, we'll move to staff. Because by no means suggesting that the quantity reserves the issue of or addresses the issue of quality or training, for that matter, having qualified staff to do the job. So currently, you mentioned the heating HMSD has 565 as a full-time employees. How many of those are supervisors to oversee kind of the boiler systems wide?
So I'll take you through a little bit of how this new model works here, right? So we have this director of heating management services, and we split the city into three geographical regions. There's a deputy director in charge of. It's a little slightly different for geography purposes, but we split. It's Manhattan and Staten Island is one deputy director. Brooklyn and South Queens is another deputy, and the Bronx and North Queens is a third deputy. Each deputy has two administrators that split their areas, and then we divided ourselves into 25 neighborhoods. So that's our management. If you follow me, there's a director, 3 deputies, 6 administrators, and then 25 superintendents. So by increasing that number of superintendents, we've increased our oversight on the boiler. In the past, they were overseeing potentially 13 developments or even 25 or 25 plus heating staff, 30 or 40 HPTs. Now we've brought that number down, so their span of control is really 15 with a max of 23.
Which is still pretty high, as far as I.
Which is still
have
pretty high,
learned.
but it's not necessarily all on duty at once. That's covering multiple shifts. So the number of plants and developments that they're overseeing is 6 instead of 13 or 14.
Okay.
A little better when you put it that way, yes. A little more reasonable for span of control.
And in terms of the distribution of its 25 neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs, obviously not all the developments are distributed evenly. So how does that distribution look like?
Yeah, right. So it's a combination of geography and, like I said, we really wanted to consider span of control. In the Bronx, for example, right, there's a development with 40 boiler rooms, right, that have 40 different spaces, and it's huge. Maybe what we did was give that super one less development, and allow them to have span of control over that larger space than the others. And it's living and breathing. We just implement. Actually, I'm very proud of. This was approved and funded in August, and we actually just fully implemented the management structure of this new model Monday, like 2 days ago. So we have this group in place. The developments have been broken out, and now we're working on refilling our frontline staff ranks to fully complete the model. We also added some management to the overnight heat desk. We run 24/7, and that additional oversight in the evening, we're actually kind of seeing that pay dividends already. I think Javier got one less phone call yesterday. But no, we got a significant number of less phone calls, and that person is actually handling the after hours operation, checking in on our roving teams. We can't be here 24/7, and that person is actually providing oversight to the teams that we don't have eyes on at night.
So, just to take it back really quickly back to to the summer maintenance program. So the monitor's report directly contradicts your testimony here. And you mentioned obviously that you have that you've made some adjustments. However, the monitor's report says that the work was actually not done, and this is based on your own data. Let me see, where it said the equipment inspections work was not adequately prepared for the start of the heating season.
Right, so that was, Chair, if I'm not mistaken, that was
Yeah.
referring to last year, correct?
Complete the summer for the 20, yeah, for
All
the
right.
2020.
2020, 2021, right?
Yeah,
21, 22, sorry.
it was the previous was about the other season.
Right, so,
Okay.
and we acknowledge some of that, and what I want to say is we did, I'm going to go back, I'm getting there. So we did complete 92.3% of 90, overhaul on 92.3% of our assets last year. And that was at the start of heating season. We did eventually complete 100% of it. And even this year, we're at 99.9% because we have one boiler that required extensive repairs. Those numbers tell a story about how we started earlier, we focused on our worst performers, and we made some improvements. But what they don't say is that we were able to provide heat this year we're able to provide heat at every development. It looks like we weren't complete, we're 99.9%, that's great, it's still not 100. However, we have enough boilers operational to provide heat adequately at every development. The issue last year was there were a couple of developments that were not ready. I don't have them off the top of my head. Javier can speak to them, or we can follow up with you, but that may not have been fully ready to go. We recognize that, and we took that as an opportunity for improvement, which we met that goal this year.
Got it.
Yeah.
Apologizing for confusing the years,
Nope.
but it's certainly heartening to hear that from that very stark finding that there was corrective action made and the work continues to proceed. And we will see the full data of, the material output of that as time goes on. So thank you for that correction, and apologies for my own confusion there. In terms of, I guess, back to the staffing, so with this new with this new structure that is in place, how many staff do the supervisors oversee?
So anywhere from, the total is anywhere from 15 to 23, and that's dependent upon staffing levels in those developments. At any given time, they're overseeing the group working on duty at 6 to 7 developments,
Got it.
if that makes sense. The reason for that increased staffing levels, if we have a night watch, so somebody may have a night watch and be responsible for an additional 5 people or something like that, and it's because they have more folks working, but in the same number of developments. We really try to keep that number 6, maybe 7 at the most.
Got it. And in terms of how are the supervisors trained? Training across NYCHA continues to be a real sticking point. How are the supervisors trained for your units? And what is the frequency of that training and content look like?
Yeah. Okay, that's what I was gonna say. So heating is a very specific area, right? And you have to have heating specific training. So all of our supers have management experience potentially outside of the heating department, but also the knowledge associated with heating systems to have that role. So it's something that fortunately we've identified some folks who are able to come in with, but it is something that they do come into the department with. I will say that we always want to do more training, and this is an area that we would like to see increased training in as well. Not just on the supervision side, on kind of the troubleshooting side, and how to and working specifically with the heating components in their area. But I think that's also an on-the-job training, right? Because they have that heating knowledge, and they go out into the field, work through their boiler rooms, begin to understand those boiler rooms, and they're learning as well. So this new group of heating supers, we're very excited to have them. We're very excited about their previous experience, and our administrators and deputy directors are working with them to make sure that they fully understand their needs in their areas. It also goes to the neighborhood model as well.
Got it. So what specific kind of training do you intend to employ?
Yeah, so as I said, I'll give you an example to answer this question, if I may, right? So as we recognize areas where our staff is having issues, what we've started to do working with the learning and development team and HR is create specific classes on a topic. Feed water treatment and analysis, for example. We're bringing staff in to go to that training. And we're doing the same thing with different aspects, supervisory training, additional handheld trainings, approval trainings, right? Because this may be a new heating super. They may be new back to the department as a super. They were probably an HPT, most likely an HPT or maintenance worker with us beforehand and coming back. So some of our vendors ensuring they have those numbers. But I think those specific areas, as we start to evaluate this new team, we'll come up with trainings for these supervisors. And I don't want to say that we have a specific idea right now would just be unfair. But as we start to see areas where they're struggling and do that initial evaluation in this new model, we will come up with trainings that we make them attend.
That is certainly fair. I think, what is important to us is that obviously that the staff get robust training, right, and timely training. Given that there's so much kind of on the ground learning in the developments themselves, and that it seems like such a highly technical nature to this work, and probably with systems that are relatively outdated and very particular. For safety purposes, first and foremost, it seems like a very important aspect. So we'd like to hear more about what the identification of what that looks like and what NYCHA's plan is to engage in continuous and robust training for its staff.
Yeah, absolutely, and I thank you for bringing that up. And I'm going to take this as an opportunity to talk about some of our HPT training. We have done some really great work, and before I say this, happy to share it with you. I know you're going to ask, and I'm happy to share it with you. We've done some really robust work on updating our HPT curriculum and the way we train them. Not necessarily the material, right? A valve is still a valve, right? They still have to learn how to fix it, and we understand that. But what we're doing is we've adjusted the curriculum to make sure that there's as we see out in the field, right? There are areas of focus that we need to focus more up front with our staff. They're potentially coming in as a blank slate, or a very inexperienced slate, I should say, very minimally used slate. So we want to make sure that they're receiving the right training. So we've done some robust work on that, working with our L&D teams. What we've also done is we've enhanced the way we communicate with the way the instructional team communicates with our heating field staff. HPTs get evaluations, they are consistent, and they are communicated between the instructor. If the instructor sees somebody is struggling on a topic in class, when they're on their field training day, that's communicated to the field supervisor to ensure that they are getting the proper help that they need. We've built in extra help days and additional trainings on specific topics where folks are falling behind in the evaluation. And most importantly, through this kind of this relationship with both our field staff and our instructors, we have actually been able to make these improvements. But the other thing that we're doing is working with Vlada's team to identify these new technologies, right? We're going to have to train staff how to fix those long term. And as we work through the pilot at Woodside Houses, one of the pieces that we're working on is we asked up front, we want a unit that our heating staff can play with and they can take apart and understand how it works. And the company was was gracious enough to provide us with one so we can understand it. And these are some of the things that we will continue to do as we get new technology, because it's vital that not only do we know how to fix the old stuff, but we have to learn how to fix the new stuff so it doesn't become like the old stuff.
Got it. Thank you. That's very helpful and obviously very promising. And we want our teams to have all the tools and practices at their disposal so that they're effective. Can you tell me how many employees NYCHA is seeking to hire for? Are there gaps for the HMSD that you're seeking to hire?
So there's openings.
There are openings.
Yes, there are vacancies.
How many vacancies?
I'm gonna get you the exact number. It's right in front of me. I apologize, but roughly. You have it in front of you, Javier? I'm sorry. I just want to get you the correct number. Touchscreens are great unless you have fat fingers. My apologies. Vacancies? Okay. So we currently have, and just general vacancies, and these are folks that haven't received a start yet. We have 44 HPT vacancies, right? And we have 81 maintenance worker vacancies. We've identified 54 candidates for maintenance worker, and we were able to pull 11 HPTs off of the most recent exam. As far as managerial vacancies, like I said, we just filled all but one of our super vacancies. That candidate is in the pipeline. Our administrator vacancies are in progress, and we're doing some very heavy recruiting with HR on this, and another team that we meet regularly with, right, to ensure that we have a correct line of a direct line of communication. What I'll also say is, you made reference, and I kind of skipped over it before, but because I was talking about the stuff I'm excited about, but I do want to say we had a backlog of HPTs who were untrained due to COVID. That last group is scheduled to start in January, and they will be joined by 11 new HPTs who are just hired.
That's great.
So the backlog will just be the people who are new. This group will still be on probation. I can get you the breakdown afterwards as well, but we have cleared our backlog of untrained HPTs starting in January. So we're looking to start 2023 with no backlog.
That's exciting. I guess when these vacancies are filled, in your professional estimation, do you think this is sufficient to be able to address the scale and scope of the issues?
Yeah, and I do believe it will. I think we're very hopeful that it will, but I do believe also, and as I've stated on a number of these items, constant evaluation is the key to this, right? So if we see that, what we realize is that we wanted a higher skill level in our heating department on the front line, so we kind of adjusted the mix of HPTs and maintenance workers. Maintenance workers typically have a higher skill set out of the gate. We've adjusted the mix. It's hovering around 50-50, as opposed to heavily newly trained staff. Right? We have a large number of staff that have under 5 years here, and then, like I said, it's the right staff. So we're still evaluating how this increase in maintenance workers is going to help us. That's in process right now. This is new to us. This is new for us, I should say, and it's the right kind of staff, right? Do we need to? We have a lot of maintenance workers now. Do we need additional skilled trades? Do we need? Do we have too many skilled trades? Do we need more frontline staff? And I think as we move into this new model, with increased supervision, really looking at the root cause of our issues, we'll be able to understand what that need is. That was a very long-winded way of saying I'm very hopeful, and yes, I do believe, and I'm very hopeful that this does solve those problems.
Got it. In terms of the, I guess I was wondering how you, I guess how your department recruits from NYCHA residents.
Let me just start by saying that before I was a NYCHA employee, I was a resident as well. And one of the programs that I came through is a Housing Youth Training Program, which is one that we're trying to re-spark sometime down the road. And so naturally, all applications, if you're a resident, we encourage in our postings that residents apply. And the program that I came through afforded me, a young man back then, a lot younger than I am now, of course, the opportunity to learn a new trade, and that's something that we want to reestablish in this department.
And is there can you say the name of the program, and are there some concrete steps that NYCHA is taking to reestablish such a program?
The program that I came through was a Housing Youth Training Program. What do you say through the lab? What do you say?
And the current program that we have is called the Caretaker Age Program. So essentially, heating funds. Caretakers will work in a development for 4 days and then do a 5th day of heating training. That took a pause during COVID, and we've actually just restarted that program. It's a 1-year program, and that way it sets them up and prepares those folks it's through the REASE program, but it actually prepares those folks not only for a career in heating, but to get on the HPT list, which is a civil service exam.
Or we're doing the same thing, playing with the microphone. Do you know how many people are currently involved in that program?
I will get you the exact number. I'll follow up with you on that. I want to say it's around the neighborhood of 10, but I'll get you the exact number.
Great. I think we can't underscore enough how important it is to expand those programs given the scale of the need, and certainly the residents. In terms of one of the issues that we hear about from residents in terms of heat issues is that NYCHA staff often take room temperatures in the kitchen or in the bathroom, where temperatures are generally higher than the rest of the apartment. How is NYCHA management communicating with line staff that this is not a correct procedure?
Did I get it? Yep. That's a great question, and it's also a topic that I take very seriously. So, having been in the role of performing that work, I know the exact step-by-step process that has to be taken. And so what I do at the start of every heating season is I push out an instructional memo that dictates that exact process. We issue it to staff. We ensure that they read it, understand it, ask questions, and sign for it. And then from there, we look at work orders, and wherever we do see that the process is not being followed, then we address that individual. If they're not taking the temperatures appropriately, if they're making up temperatures, not attaching the photo, we've seen a couple of things we've come across through that QAing of those work orders. Mm-hmm. And when we do come across those things, we hold people accountable.
And what does that look like?
The accountability part of it?
Yeah.
Well, it's a progressive disciplinary process. The instructional memo is the written instruction, and then anything after that is a counseling memo. And if you do it twice, then you're up on a local hearing. If you do it 3 times, then you're facing a general hearing, where you're actually, maximum punishment is you're terminated.
Is there engagement with residents in that process?
In the,
I guess just in the feedback, right? Obviously, you're looking at staffing patterns of noncompliance of procedures. I would suspect there's probably some engagement with residents
Of
that
course,
is
yeah.
reflective of noncompliance.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And whenever a resident brings a concern, any resident brings that concern to us, we investigate it fully and completely. Another piece to this is also, like I said, I think where we're looking to see improvement is this enhanced supervision that I mentioned through the neighborhood model. And to Javier's point, the first thing we want our staff to succeed. Progressive discipline is a tool in the toolbox, but as I alluded to earlier, right, feed water analysis, we recognize it as an area for improvement, and instead of providing memos and we want to bring that staff in, we want to make sure that they have the right baseline, and then if it's actually a personality issue, we can address that, or a lack of understanding, we can address that, but we do want our staff to succeed. So we try to start with a re-education.
Yeah, sure, and a cultural practice, right, and excellence that we want the agency to make sure it espouses in every unit of its performance. In terms of, if we could go back to funding, our favorite topic of all time. Within the past few fiscal years, the city has invested, I guess, $28 million in operating funds to replace heating equipment components. Given the, I guess, poor track record in spending city funds, and I think this is probably more particular to capital than operating, can you update us on how the spending is occurring?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll bring in call into the bullpen for Joyce and Brand to join us. Well, she's back. There we go.
Thank you for the question. And I'm going to have to get back to you about that specific tranche of funding. But I would say in general, I think what's really critical is to talk about how much more effective NYCHA is getting at spending all dollars, including city dollars. And we're participating on the Capital Process Reform Task Force with other city agencies to really try to improve our city dollar spending on the capital side. But in the meantime, one of the things that we are doing is partnering with each of our counterparts, whether it's the Comptroller's Office or OMB, to make sure that we're proceeding as efficiently as we can. But I will circle back to when I find out which of the $28 million tranche was funded.
Sure. And Joy, if you could, in that learning and in that process, have there been any specific changes that the agency has made to relieve some of these challenges of delays?
Yes, and I think there's been considerable changes, although I realize that some of them are probably not very visible to the person on the street or the person at the development. As the monitor mentioned in their recent report, we've improved the quality of our project schedules, our schedule management, and our reporting. And we're standardizing engagement both internally and externally. So what that means is we're working with other parts of NYCHA in the prioritization, the design, the construction, and the turnover processes of equipment to make sure that there's success in long-term maintenance. And conversely, we're increasing our engagement externally with the new standard operating procedure, and we're staffing up a new team in capital to increase our ability to touch every development with capital improvements on a recurring basis so that we can keep people up to speed. And I really think that that's very important. You've talked a lot about resident engagement. I know in Red Hook, we certainly have the resources to do that. We'd like to expand that type of engagement to many more projects.
So in terms of capital drawdown, is there a metric that you're using kind of to assess progress, because I know in prior years that and I might be using the wrong word, so forgive me, but drawing down on capital resources was very, very low, and I think the lowest among all city agencies. Is there a metric that you're using to assess, keep yourselves on track, push harder?
Sure, and I will certainly circle back with our progress. Across multiple funding streams, we have various goals. On the federal side, we have a timeline goal of how quickly we need to spend money. Certainly on the scope side, we've made commitments to HUD about what we are going to deliver. So we need to get those projects done. And then, as you're saying, on the city side and the state side, it can often take some time to get to substantial obligation. And that often is because the design process for these projects is such a substantial part of the work. And so during design, you don't spend as much money, but because of the complex context, because of the stakeholder engagement, that process might last for some time. And then now, as many of our projects are going into construction, you're going to start seeing those drawdowns happen much more quickly. And again, we are on track to meet our HUD commitments for boiler replacement in 2026.
Is that unique to me? I feel like the federal level dollars y'all do really great with. It's the city and state dollars that linger no man's land. Is that usual that you're generally on track to meet, the HUD spending requirements? Oh, she got muted.
I apologize. I'm so used to automatically muting when I'm done talking that I
Do it all the
keep doing. I
time.
will not touch the mute button anymore. You're correct. There are different processes for spending money from the federal, from mainly the HUD pod, although there are other federal sources that we pursue, especially on the disaster recovery side, than on the state and the city front. On the state, we certainly have to come to an agreement on how we're going to spend money. That can take some time. And we work very closely with the state to make sure that we are moving that process along as quickly as possible. On the city front, I think you're very familiar with the challenges of expending city capital dollars. We are in the queue with all the other city agencies trying to get work done. And so our goal on the city front, again, we're participating in that task force, but we also are working on what we can do internally to create as much efficiency as possible, so that the packages that we're giving to our counterparts at controller or OMB don't need to be returned or don't prompt questions. And so that's something that's a continuous improvement process that we've been working on over the last year.
Got it, thank you. It was exactly one of the questions I was going to ask in terms of the procurement process that we know has so many delays. I was curious around how City Council could be helpful in correcting some of those procurement issues, and obviously working on with this task force. Yeah, she did it again.
I'm just going to sit on my hands because it's so automatic. So yes, I appreciate that. And one of the new mechanisms that NYCHA has been able to take advantage of, the design build legislation, is really an opportunity to see if we can speed up that procurement process, right? Instead of going out to the market for design and then going out again for construction, you can go out to the market once, have a single contract, and that contractor goes through an iterative process of design and construction. They're working very closely with the residents, and that's something that we've been using increasingly across the portfolio, and we have it at several heating projects. And so we're tracking what benefits are coming from that model, and attempting to use it in some other categories as well. It's certainly not for every category of construction, but it is really helpful to have a single point of responsibility where the designer and the contractor are working together from the beginning, and that's something that we hope will really speed up the construction process.
So recently, news reports mentioned that NYCHA informed the monitor, HUD, and the U.S. Attorney that it would be difficult to meet some of the HUD NYCHA deadlines due to the drop in rental revenue. Are these report accurate? And if so, can you speak more about the reaction to that information?
So I am going to pass it to Brian momentarily, but I did want to update the record. We had spoken about this before. I just want to clarify that I got
Okay.
this right. There are 10 residents in the caretaker age program. Over the next 2 years, 100 residents are slated to be trained through the Clean Energy Academy in clean energy related skills. And I don't recall if you asked this, but I will give you the info anyway. Of our 187 HPTs, 53 are NYCHA residents, 235 of our maintenance workers, 27 are NYCHA residents. And just update that record. And Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yes, council member. So the funding that we're talking about here is expense funding, not capital. What Joy is, so we should be still on track for those capital improvements. However, we do have a real concern on the expense side. We have a total of arrears about $450 million, and rent makes up about 30% of our budget. Of that $450 million, over $150 million is funding that we believe would be ERAP eligible. And so these are, tenants who fell behind during the pandemic, like many tenants throughout New York City, who did not live in, public housing. Unfortunately, the state legislation deprioritized federally assisted tenants. And so they, like their neighbors, filled out applications, or they worked with NYCHA and we applied on their behalf. And unfortunately, they've been, waiting to hear, but, I don't think they're gonna hear back. The waiting is also a bit of is a big issue too, because, while their ERAP applications are pending, they can't qualify for things like one-shots, right? So there is other assistance that's available to them that they can't take advantage of. But this is a tremendous hole in our budget, and it is something that we are working through now. But it is something that, unless we figure out a way, it will impact services as well.
Thank you for that. Can you, I guess, paint the picture of what services we're talking about?
Yep. So expense funding, covers, of course, staff. It covers, repairs time. It covers groundkeeping. We don't, we haven't fully fleshed out our budget, right now in terms of, where it's going to see an impact, but you don't see a huge, hole in your budget like this, $450 million without it, without it impacting something. I don't have a clear picture exactly where, but it is, the monitor's 100% right that, you can't sustain this type of hit without feeling it. And we will come back to you and to this committee, to talk about longer terms and also give you a preview and then have longer conversations about our budget moving forward. We're on the calendar year, and
Right.
so so our budget will be, we'll work that through with you as well.
Right, particularly concerning under the context of the city is, the mayor announced an additional round of PEGs moving forward. So we're talking about additional cuts in a very desperate situation tonight. Deeply, deeply concerned. Can you tell us more specifically what the plan is in terms of the specific requests that are being made to our state and federal colleagues in terms of increases, and to city for that matter?
Sure. So we have regular communication both with HUD congressional staff and with the governor's office and the state legislative staff. I remember a time when, for more than 10 years, the state just ignored NYCHA and said it's not our issue, not a problem. I will say since 2015, we have been in the budget, every year with the exception of one. So that is an improvement. We will continue to work with the legislature and the governor's office for capital funds as well. We have also, had conversations with them about our budget and about ERAP as well, and we'll continue to do that. In terms of
So what's the ask, Brian? What's the ask from our state colleagues specifically for capital and specifically for operational funding?
We are not there yet. We haven't finalized the legislative agenda, but when we do, I can come back to you with that. But I don't want to give away the good part of the story until it's there. But we will come back to you on that. In terms, the legislative session starts in January, so we can, we'll come back to you in the beginning of the legislative session.
January, great.
Yep.
Couple weeks here.
Okay. In terms of federal, we do, regularly talk to HUD about, taking advantage of every opportunity that's out there, whether it's grants, whether it is, different types of funding that are afforded to, housing authorities, in distress. HUD has been, really good about saying, you need to make sure that you take advantage of every dollar that's out there, and I believe that we are doing that. Unlike in the past, and so we do talk with them regularly, and we also do talk to the delegation regularly, and we'll continue to do that too as well.
So I would love to hear specifically what assistance you're seeking for HUD. Not only, I'm sure I know you engage in multiple programs, but to really have us understand what the asks are. I will tell you that it is, in my very short experience here, has been generally nebulous to understand both how hard NYCHA is advocating for specific programs and the scale and scope of the actual money it pursues.
Sure.
At each level of government, and obviously I know it changes, but the target is ever moving and makes it very difficult to see how it holds its line in what it truly needs, rather than just like taking whatever it gets, which is what you ultimately have to do. But
I don't think it would characterize with that. I mean, I think we have a robust program on all levels. I mean, I lived in Albany last year practically.
For the trust.
Not only for the trust though, pre-budget as well. They weren't allowing people up pre-budget. So, but I did spend a lot of time on the doing things virtually, pre-budget. And we were successful to get the largest grant. We got $350 million in last year's state budget. And before that, with the federal partners, we were in constant communication on Build Back Better. I feel like Build Back Better was a bad relationship. I went from not believing to truly believing and thinking that it's not going to let me down, and then unfortunately it did. But it was, it is something on all levels of government. This isn't something that we're not. We're not doing it like a community organization where we're out in front and we're holding rallies. It is a lot of stuff that is, it is stuff that you don't see every day, but it is stuff that is definitely done. But we'll be happy to, set up something with you where we talk about, a strategy on all three levels.
I appreciate that, and I do recall our conversations of the level of funding you were advocating from the state, which I found shockingly low, given the scale and scope. So I think we certainly don't have to debate that. I think my point in the question is that residents, the public, do not see how NYCHA is fighting for itself in these realms because there's so much behind the doors negotiation going on.
Right.
And I think it makes a difference. But this is not unique to NYCHA.
Yep.
This is certainly every agency. It blows my mind how agencies are making do with inadequate resources, right? And workers are doing quite amazing stuff, but won't actually ever admit that it is fully inadequate and that they need a more robust level of funding to truly meet the needs.
No, I agree, and it's something I've talked to Danny Barber and the CCOP about. It wasn't always this way, too. We used to go to Washington together, with buses. We used to go to Albany together with buses, and we have talked about doing, definitely starting with Washington early next year, and advocating together. I mean, we're much more effective when we work together. We agree way more than we don't, and it is and also legislators respond, when they hear it is, the constituents and the people who are facing this every day are the ones, making the ask. So yes, a partnership will work better, and I think it's part of our plan for 23.
Thank you so much. So I guess we're getting close to wrapping up here. We certainly covered a lot of ground, and thank you for your work and patience with the questions. I just wanted to quickly segue to resident engagement. From the hearing last year, I understand that the heating action plan outlines a communication protocol with residents regarding outages and repairs. Can you again walk us through that protocol?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a planned outage, we give 48 hours notice, at least 48 hours notice, and then again the morning of notice to our residents an hour before the outage starts on the day of. We do that so that there's ample time to prepare for that hot water outage or heat outage, and also in the morning, if you're in the middle of using the hot water or heat, it gives you time to finish up what you're doing. What we've also added is the ability, when we close the outage with the robocall, you can still say that you have an issue as a resident, or through the app, you can say that there is an issue. And that will alert us that we need to do some additional follow-up. As I stated earlier, we've added some triage questions into the application when reporting an outage. And also within the CCC, additional questions. Another improvement in the app that will guide us in our response. Another improvement in the app is you can elect to receive push notifications through the My NYCHA app for real-time heating disruptions. What I'll also say is we aside from the action plans, we just have made a better effort this heating season. We reached out to all the district council chairs prior to the start of heating season, or on the first day of heating season, to educate them on some of the additional work that we did after last year's heating season. And we're engaging with, we're also tracking complaints as opposed to just outages. We're looking at high complaint counts in an area. If it's concentrated, we're going to reach out to that tenant association, that resident association, and really work with them to find out what the problems are.
Got it. In terms of unplanned outages, what's the expected time frame that NYCHA will inform residents in?
So there's a couple of ways that we can get notified of a planned outage. One is we can see a high ticket count. We will send out a robocall once we receive high ticket count. We'll go investigate, and I'm gonna cough myself.
So with unplanned outages, the expectation is to get to the root of the problem immediately. In most cases, we know what failed, and when we create the unplanned outage, it captures the affected area. And immediately within the hour of that outage being created a robocall goes out to the residents in the affected area, informing them of the service disruption, whether it's heat or hot water. And what we do is we move quickly to, as I said, initially we identify what the root cause is, and then we start dispatching the appropriate staff. The idea behind all that is to immediately restore services, at least within the first 6 to 8 hours is what we constantly aim for.
Got it. So within the hour of your becoming aware of an outage, you're deploying a robocall. Do you use other forms of communication for residents?
Yeah, so building is automatically flyered and posted. Thank you. Building is automatically flyered and posted. And we meet that requirement of within 2 hours, right? And the tenant association or resident association leadership is notified as well.
Great. I would love for the council members to be included, particularly in the when you're doing planned outages. I have never received a notice of a planned outage, but I get all the notices from the residents, both planned and unplanned. I think that would help also council members to be able to help you respond to residents that are concerned and experiencing outages.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're happy to follow up with you.
Great. In terms of, I think what we saw during Hurricane Sandy was interesting building networks, right, throughout communities that helped to support, inform each other when things were happening. I was curious if in the thinking around obviously resilience and communication networks with tenants, obviously you have your TAs. But TAs are often very limited in both their reach, and sometimes they too are seniors. Has NYCHA ever thought about building out some other kind of resident-to-resident communication system, like where there are building captains or something that is much more dispersed, right? Where the responsibility for sharing the information is more dispersed across residents. This happened during Hurricane Sandy in many of the NYCHA developments. In fact, that's how the neighbors supported each other. So it happens informally. I was just curious if NYCHA had ever considered using that model.
So Vlad, in Vlad's team actually is doing some of this, and Vlad, maybe you could talk about it and something that we could build on too as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. Great question, Chair. So particularly for BMS, because it's a system we've been rolling out in the last 2 years, although we do a lot of communication pre-construction, it's really not felt until the heat, goes from 80 plus degrees to the comfortable 72 to 74. And so we recognize that more communication needs to happen in that particular space. We've partnered with Green City Force, the young people there, to go door to door and do communication, particularly with the vulnerable populations in the past. Brian and Javier and my team have established communication with the TA leadership, but I think Green City Force is who we turn to often for that kind of support. But it is something that, community-based information sharing is something that's hard to build centrally. To the extent that we can continue to build that up, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, thank you.
And I just wanted to come up and share some information cards that Javier's team shares about the building management system and our Green City Force colleagues, so you can see them in Spanish and English.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much.
And I think that's, we appreciate that feedback, and I think that's something that we'll take back. There are some resident associations that do that.
Yeah.
Already, and I think this is something we can definitely take back with them and work on.
Yeah, very much like a local CERT teams, right? Where it happens informally, but the truth of the matter is as much as we can support that approach, it'll impact everything, right? Everything from the water to the heat to any emergency situation that occurs on a campus. They'll have a better awareness and a system for communicating that we've seen to be very effective. So thank you for sharing that. I just want to quickly seg to some gas outage questions. I understand that the time to restore gas outages was down in 2021 to 96 days from the previous year. What do this year's numbers look like?
Don't believe we have that, but Joy maybe could talk about some of the challenges of, restoring gas. I just want to make sure that everybody understands, though, gas is cooking gas. It's not related to heat. So we could definitely follow up with that. But, the challenges of restoring gas, though, definitely remain.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilmember, for that question. And I'm glad to hear that you observed our improvement in performance. I did not bring those numbers with me today, but what you're seeing is really the effect of that standardization we're talking about, really having clear processes that cross the agency's divisions and departments, because the restoration of gas involves so many players, both within the agency and external agencies. And so we're happy to share documentation about those steps and get you the numbers about what our current restoration time is.
Great. No, I recognize that obviously this was not the focus of the hearing. It is a persistent and very long, significantly longer than heat outages, right? Whereas 6 months, 9 months, a year without cooking gas is just mind-blowing, honestly. And we keep seeing more and more of these persistent outages and not very good solutions for residents. This is a huge economic impact for residents, not only economic, but health. And so it's a major issue that we need to figure out how to address.
Yeah, and I just one last thing, I don't want to go on a bit, but I think it also, too, is just another real symptom of the major infrastructure issue that we have. Going back to what we were talking about with Bronx River, in the beginning of the hearing, gas outages usually are a plumbing issue. It's usually it is usually the gas risers or the piping associated with them are leaking, and I also been saying internally too that we should probably start to change our language on it, because I think when people hear outage, they associate it with like a heating outage or a no water outage, and they think it's something that we could send a staff there, they can do some repairs and get it back going in a few hours. It is much more like a big construction project. It usually involves asbestos abatement. It usually involves, replacing piping, it getting behind walls, and then a lot of coordination with residents, with the Department of Buildings, with the utility companies, a lot of, vendors many times. So it is often, comparable to a capital improvement more than an outage.
Right. Yeah, no, and given that we are expecting, given the infrastructure challenges that we know, it would be fair to expect they're going to continue and they may increase. And so the question then becomes, how do we mitigate? And the current program of hot plates.
Sure. I think all smart things go back to Vlada. And so one of the things that we've been looking to is how do we, think in the future, like, is there a way to get us off gas and to electrify buildings? And it's something that Vlada's been looking into too, because, a world without, relying on gas would be, I think all of our dreams, so.
Yeah, I can maybe quickly speak to this a little bit. I think that the same engineers that helped write the specifications for the heat pump have been inspired and have developed a battery-operated induction stove. We are very interested. We're following this closely. Of course, lithium-ion batteries are a concern in apartments, so we're going to be very, very careful in, bringing this technology if we ever consider it, and we'll continue to look at other options. But the idea of how do we completely eliminate gas risers so that it doesn't become a huge construction project is a very important idea that we're exploring.
Yeah, and also thank you for that. Important for the future of our city, but also, the program currently that exists in terms of restaurant allowance for meal purchases has truly a lot to be desired. I think there needs to be some more creativity there for some communities that don't have a robust restaurant, and I'm talking specifically about Red Hook. We have 4 restaurants in the neighborhood. It's not an option, right? So essentially, residents are truly getting no relief and having to spend significantly more income, which they're often struggling with, to address this. So I think we'll need to return and figure out how can we be more creative and solution-oriented to this persistent and clearly expensive problem that we're facing. In terms of I wanted to quickly, one last piece on the capital funding. We mentioned a good number of boilers that had been replaced. I guess I wanted to make sure that we have on the record in terms of, it says that we have the capital plan to replace 297 boilers by the end of 2096. And Joy, you mentioned the 123 for this particular year. This was with state funding, as I understand it. Is that correct, Joy?
So
The 297 boilers by the end of 2026 that we talked about a little earlier?
it was 346 boilers in total by the end of 2026 is NYCHA's commitment in the HUD agreement.
In the HUD agreement, okay.
Yeah. I might have, I'm not sure if I had used an increment instead of a total.
No, I may very well have. We have so many different so many different numbers from different pots. Can I ask, what is the criteria that NYCHA uses to determine a new heating system for a building?
Joy, if you want to, go ahead.
Sure, and it's a collaborative process, so I definitely want heating to add on, but when we have the resources to do heating plant replacements, we're taking into account developments with the most need for investment. And so we use the data sources available, resident complaints, outages, information from the heating department on sites that require the most funding and manpower to keep operational, and then certainly that on the ground inspection that is being done, that some hands on the equipment to say what the condition of the equipment is. That said, right now we have no additional funding capacity for projects. So if it's not already in our pipeline, or it's not one of the few pilot projects that GLAD is being able to progress, then right now we won't be able to add new developments to that list.
So the money that is sitting unspent that has been allocated for capital projects is all designated to specific projects. There is no untagged.
Yes, our entire 5-year capital plan is committed with the priorities of the HUD agreement and then the pillars that we focus on as an agency. And really, with the exception of very minimal discretionary dollars, we don't have any wiggle room.
And council member, I want to say, from now to 2026, we have over $2 billion planned for investment in our heating systems. 1.3 billion of that are federal funds. 200 million are from energy performance contracts. In state funds, it's 353 million. City funds, it's 200 million, and then city funds tied to the agreement, it's 171 million dollars.
Got it, thank you. So in terms of, if a development has been under the RAD and PAC conversion, and they're in need of a boiler upgrade or repair, is that amount captured under the capital plan?
That's not this. No, these are just for traditional,
Okay, so
yeah.
that's
Correct.
all, and who tracks actually the capital needs for the RAD pact developments?
Under our real estate team, there is a team that tracks, the construction they're doing, how they're doing it, making sure that they're also working through compliance issues, and so there is a team that looks at them and monitors their performance.
Got it. Thank you for that. I think this might be it. Excuse me for one quick second. I just want to. I guess checking in really quickly on Sotomayor houses in the Bronx. We understand that there was a boiler replacement paid for with state funding and experienced a failure after flooding. Can you talk about what, if anything, NYCHA is doing to address the issues from a more holistic perspective to avoid, obviously, building and flooding type of situations?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to something that we've discussed a number of times, right? I think it's better coordination and communication amongst, just even our different business units within NYCHA. We work with, going into this neighborhood model for heating is very important. That increased oversight and that increased cooperation between the local teams allows for a faster response. So to use the Sotomayor, for example, right, there was a capital project in a heating room that was affected by the responsibility of property management and that team. What we learned and what we take away from that is better and enhanced coordination. So the three teams actually meet bi-weekly together to discuss issues and elevate issues. And then, we have our one-offs with ANCM and our one-offs with property management as well.
And Joy can speak to this probably better than almost anyone, because the projects that she is, oversaw with, Sandy, and you'll see, you see it in the Rockaways, you see it in Red Hook. They didn't just build back where it was, right? They now are above ground, in most cases too, and so, they're going to be much more resilient. Other projects like that I could just think of off the top of my head is like in Marcy houses, they're going to get we're not just going to go back to the basement there. We're going to, come up and have a new building that will provide, serve as the heating plant. It'll be much more resilient. It will be much less likely to be flooded, things like that too, because when they build these systems, we didn't face the same climate crisis that we have right now, and the idea of that they would be one day there would be 6 feet of water in a heating plant just seemed unimaginable. But now we've learned stuff, and we need to, the thing about Ocean Bay, which we were able to do with federal funding, with FEMA dollars, is we have. Heating systems on the roofs of those buildings. So, and it's also unique to the one building. It's not the entire development. So if we have an outage there, it is one building. It's not the entire complex. So there are ways that we can do this that are much smarter, much more resilient, and will it's better use of the public dollars.
So is that a criteria that is embedded kind of in all the design project assessments when you're replacing? Like, is that a whole?
Yeah, so that I'm gonna pass to Joy on this one, just to clarify one item. At Sotomayor specifically, it was a tank room that flooded. It caused a number of problems in going back into the boiler room, but the boiler itself didn't flood. Again, that's just a waste stack or a waistline. And I hate to come full circle to complain about this again, but this goes to antiquated disinvestment in our plumbing systems over the number of years, and we see a lot of this. It's unfortunate, and but we've unfortunately had to get very good at working with our partners in our different business units to respond effectively to these leaks from above, whether it comes from a heating line or a domestic water line or even worse as a waste line. But to answer your question on the resiliency question, I'll defer to Joy.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about NYCHA's climate adaptation plan, because last fall when NYCHA released the plan, we knew that it was new to the agency as a whole. The Sandy recovery projects invested about $2.7 billion to date and had raised up critical equipment at 200 buildings. That incremental cost isn't typically funded when critical infrastructure is funded. As Keith had said earlier, we're funded for a boiler. And so what we're trying to do now is really make sure that the design teams and the design build teams have access to all the information we've gathered on the risks that NYCHA's developments are facing, whether that's storm surge, extreme heat, extreme rain, groundwater, extreme wind, and really building that into the design process. In some cases, that will be an incremental cost that's bearable. In other cases, it will be a cost that will require us to pursue additional funding, possibly through the disaster recovery funding sources. And we're certainly looking to CDBG-DR money to fund those increments to raise boiler rooms above grade. And finally, I just wanted to mention that this is just the start. So, Vlada's group is piloting a lot of really great systems, and the Clean Heat for All system is, again, just by virtue of design, moving that critical equipment from a centralized plant, from a basement, up into the units. So it's really not at that same risk of flooding. And if something happens, that one unit can be replaced without impacting other apartments. So we are definitely building this in as we work with MOCEJ on the Local Law 41 climate design resiliency guidelines.
Thank you so much, Joy. I know there is an enormous amount of work being done, and I think the entire city has to include the costs of climate change and everything that it does, from how it operates, how its staffing gets deployed, quite frankly, right, and how they interact with this new reality. To very technical capital projects. So I think not particularly unique to NYCHA, but I think our worst case scenario in terms of the deployment of public dollars is business as usual, and then having to correct it after the fact, which we have seen a lot of, which is an utter waste of public dollars and frustrating for everyone involved, quite frankly. So. I'm glad to hear of that, integration, and obviously NYCHA has really felt it firsthand, right? So I appreciate that. I guess with that, we can turn it over to public comment. I want to thank you all for your testimony, your time, and your work. And there are millions of other questions I didn't ask that I will ask off the record, but I appreciate certainly the work and the strides that have been made, and the continued commitment to do better by residents every single day. The night is young on our winter season, so we'll be back to reconvene around how both the preventative measures and the improvements that everyone is working hard on materialize at the end. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity. We really do appreciate it, and we always appreciate your continued support, and especially appreciate your recognition of the hard work of our staff. I know that means a lot for them, as it does for me. So thank you, and I'm sure we'll be speaking offline soon.
We'd like to call on Aixa Torres.
Hi, good afternoon.
Starting
I'm
time.
on the Zoom. I'm on the Zoom.
We hear you.
Okay.
You may
Good
begin.
afternoon. Uh, okay, so the heating system. Of the people that I saw from NYCHA, the only one that I know because I have him on speed dial when I have a real emergency is Javier Amandova. And he's the only one I really deal with when it comes to heating. However, my issue and my comment about this whole, we are one of those developments of the state funded that are getting new boilers. I have been told that the contractor that is going to do my development is Richards Plumbing, and I am furious. I really, and the response was, oh, they were the lowest bidder. I don't understand why they were picked. They're horrible. They've already been in Smith. We had them do something that was simple and it ended up taking months. And then another vendor had to be hired to fix up their mess up. So to the tune of $31 million, somebody explained to me, and I would like to know why this decision was made, that procurement has done something like this. And I know that I've spoken to other TA presidents who we're now in this thrust of getting new boilers. Will it really make a difference in our apartments, right? Will the apartments be normal in terms of heat and cooling? Or are we just going to have the same thing that we have now where one side of the building is in Arctic and the other one is in Africa from heat, right? So I really don't understand why, or no one has yet to answer me why, like for Smith, why we have a plumber who, like we did for the Sandy, who did a horrible job. Then they had to come in and spend some more money in our development. And as everyone knows, there is no love lost between Miss Cinderbrand and I because of her disrespect. And she has yet to answer any of my questions. And so, this is my testimony. The heating issue has to be people have to be really part of the process. And we really have not been part of the process. Yes, I have the plans for the boiler. I have commented, I've had experts look at it and all of that. But when it came to the selection of the plumber company, knowing that they're horrible and that I've complained about them a lot, please explain to me why they've actually, for doing a lousy job, they what is it? You do a lousy job and so you get more contracts and make more money in NYCHA. And so I have a problem. I have a problem with the boiler system that's going up that, yes, we've approved. I'm not going to say we haven't because NYCHA is going to say, oh, but I don't approve of the vendor, of the contractor, because he's been horrible. And yes, they've sent somebody. I assure you I don't want to hear any of that. I have a resident who has died on my board from 9/11 cancer because the people from the resiliency did not listen to us about taking precautions with the dust and everything else. I have another board member who had to have surgery for cancer because for the same reason. And if I sound angry, I am. There's no getting around my grief and my anger about how NYCHA has handled contractors and they're being awarded for doing lousy jobs. And I yield the floor, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to make this comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Torres. We will need to continue that inquiry around specific contractors, that is for sure. We will follow up with you. Next, there's no. Well, on that note, I think this is the only public testimony we had for today, which is highly unusual, but here we are. More to come. I want to thank everyone. Thank you, Aixa, for being here, for the work you do with the residents every single day. Thank you to the staff. Obviously, this is an ongoing story. We are in the beginning of our heating season, and we will see how this all performs. But I wish everyone a healthy, safe holiday and more work to come. I appreciate you all. Thank you very much.